Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Corey LeBlanc, and I am the ceremonial witch from witchcraft. Well, from ceremonial magic and witchcraft. But anyways, windows are down in the car. I'm going to pick up my daughter at dance, and today is going to be the day I celebrate the fucking massacre of millions of turkeys. Yay! Go fucking massacre turkeys and call it Thanksgiving and give thanks for all the turkeys that had to die for this shit. Well, why is it that we kill shit on fucking holidays? Christmas, we go kill a bunch of fucking pine trees. The only fucking tree, well, not the only tree, but one of the only trees that fucking don't die. You know, every other tree dies, comes back to life, dies, comes back to life. Where's a pine tree? You know, it will die eventually, but what I'm saying is it doesn't go through the seasonal death and rebirth cycle like bugs, insects, and trees and other plants, grass, and all that shit, right? Then on Christmas, we go and kill a bunch of fucking pine trees and put it in our house. And then on Thanksgiving, we kill fucking turkeys and eat them. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Why is this our fucking traditions? Why are our traditions so disgusting with this shit? You know, it's one thing if you do it as a sacrifice, then okay. But, and you know, maybe that's how it was at one point. Maybe that's where these things come from. You know, I have the knowledge and all the info that I looked up to know where the lines have gotten skewed and things like Halloween, you know, kids dressing up like goons and goblins and ghosts and scary things, you know. Well, mainly, I mean, people dress up and, you know, women at fucking clubs be slutty nurses and slutty maids and shit like that. But I mean, you know, going back to ghosts and goblins and ghouls, well, the kids dressing up like these paranormal people, paranormal entities, I guess, they are playing the role of our ancestors that come and visit us on November 1st at 12 p.m. Basically, you know, the dumb supper, you have to eat a plate out of food and some drink for your ancestors, because that day the veil is very thin, and they're going to come fucking check up on you. And, I mean, this shit, go look at Birch's page. He's got videos about this, and, I mean, I'm giving you, like, the basic version of this knowledge, which I'm probably just repeating what he's saying. So, you know, I'm not claiming that, you know, I don't have a tradition per se when it comes to witchcraft, but I do have some things that came from my grandmother and her mother. I do have some things that I've figured out as part of maybe my family lineage of witch and witchcraftness. And then, like I said before, I was in a coven, and then I knew more than the high priest that was trying to do the coven, and he got hurt. You know, I got kicked out, and then people wanted me to become a high priest of my own coven, and I'm not there. I'm not that person. Just because I read a lot and know a lot doesn't mean, you know, I should be running a fucking coven and being in charge of people's spirituality. That is not a step, because I don't have my spirituality in check yet. So why would I be able to be in charge of someone else's spirituality? And that should be a question that everybody asks themselves when joining a coven, or basically underneath anybody. If anybody is, you know, learning from a guru of some type of guru, basically, if this person doesn't have their life in check, and doesn't have shit figured out, and, you know, they're regurgitating shit, and, you know, like I said, I showed people some manifestations that I had in my house, the cards and all that, and, you know, I gave you guys what I used to get those things. But I've never proclaimed myself to be a guru, and all I'm trying to do is tell people how they should do what I did if they want to try what I did to get what I did, basically. Sorry, I'm sidetracked because I'm driving. But anyways, back to the guru. If you're learning from someone and they don't have their life in order, or, you know, have been doing it for at least a substantial amount of time, or, you know, I'm not saying, because anybody can have cars and houses and say, yeah, I did magic to get it, you know, and you have no real way of knowing if that's factual, true, or not. So, but, you know, there are some things you can kind of look for to know. But yeah, if you're learning from somebody and they don't have their life in order, and they're not in control of any part of their life, or, their finances, and they're just coming on YouTube, and the shit they say is probably still from books or whatever, then, you might want to go look elsewhere. Like, use your self-intuition, meditate on it, shit like that, You can do all that. But anyways, so back to the dumb supper. Yeah, if you don't leave something out for your if you don't leave a dumb supper out, if you don't leave a plate of food out, some drink out, some offerings out, a little sacrifice, whatever. If you don't have something out for your ancestors on, it'll be October 31st at midnight, technically November 1st, shit, then you are going to get fucked with by your ancestors. And because they're from your bloodline and all that, they're not going to do anything too outrageous. But, some things can go sideways for a little bit. Money, something's gone missing in your house, whatever, These are the stories and all that. And, if I went over the years, because I've never done this, I've only done this now for like 2 years that I've known about this, right? So, it's hard to really say if that's true or not true, but I do believe that the veil is very much as transparent as it possibly can be that day of the year, because there are certain feelings and stuff like that, and something about Halloween and that fall time, and as a kid in high school, fucking the parties we had and the things that happened were just too intense to go through right now. I need a whole episode to really talk about that and maybe come up with the correspondences and link it all together and why I think it has something to do with that veil being transparent. But anyways, so that's the dumb supper, and then Halloween, that's what we do, right? Halloween, we dress up like ghouls and goblins. So nothing's dying there, okay? But technically, we're not doing it right either. Somebody that's the point I'm trying to make. Thanksgiving, we fuck up and kill a bunch of turkeys. That's what we're about to do. I don't eat turkey. I don't eat meat. But we kill a bunch of fucking turkeys, and, it's in the name of giving thanks, and the Pilgrims and the Indians fucking becoming cool with each other and shit like that. But it's just a bunch of hypocrisy and bullshit. But, and then Halloween, it managed to survive, and that's why I like when Birch explains it. I like the way he approaches it, because he talks about it and, like, why he's kind of thankful for Christianity in some ways, or whoever made this shit popular, Halloween, and marketed all that. It was probably more like stores, franchises. But point is, it's in some ways still is, we're acting it out. And when you're aware of Halloween, like being a reenactment and us acting out the dumb supper and our ancestors coming down, well, then you can, instead of hating on it and going around saying, oh, fucking Christianity, they changed the meaning, and going out there and acting like a know-it-all and telling people, this is what I do, this is what I know, and I'm smarter than you, and all this. Well, you can incorporate it. You can go to your ritual, your altar store, you can do a ritual at your altar, and, talk to your ancestors, leave them something on your altar, or, use something to, get their essence, call them to you, however your process is. I can go over some of the things I do maybe in a later video, and the books that I learned them from. A lot of that is hoodoo. But anyways, and say, I'm going to go out, and everybody who's dressed up as a ghost and a goblin and a monster and all this shit, this is in memory for you guys, I dedicate this Halloween and my children dressing up, and maybe I'll even dress up, and you can dedicate that to your ancestors as a show, a sign of fucking respect, that you love them and you miss them and all that, especially if you have a partner that isn't willing for you to leave out a plate for your dead family members that are coming over, even her dead family members are coming over. So that's what I would say would be a good little thing you could do. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Corey LeBlanc, and I am the ceremonial witch from witchcraft. Well, from ceremonial magic and witchcraft. But anyways, windows are down in the car. I'm going to pick up my daughter at dance, and today is going to be the day I celebrate the fucking massacre of millions of turkeys. Yay! Go fucking massacre turkeys and call it Thanksgiving and give thanks for all the turkeys that had to die for this shit. Well, why is it that we kill shit on fucking holidays? Christmas, we go kill a bunch of fucking pine trees. The only fucking tree, well, not the only tree, but one of the only trees that fucking don't die. You know, every other tree dies, comes back to life, dies, comes back to life. Where's a pine tree? You know, it will die.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? I'm back. Sorry, I picked up my daughter and I came home, and now I'm back at home and I'm recording. So I'm going to continue where I think I left off. I was talking about the dumb supper and dedicating, you know, your kids dressing up, you dressing up, Halloween in general, you know. Maybe, you know, if you do want to take the form, the archetype, but if you want to be that person who informs people on, you know, Samhain, dumb supper, shit like that, you know, well, you should do all eight powerful days, 8 important days of the year, both solstice, both equinoxes, and then the 4 other holidays, right? Samhain being one of them. I can't even think right now, to be honest. But anyways, so if you want to inform people, do it in not such a dicky way. Kind of like, I know, and that's, like I said before, that's why I like how Birch approaches it. He says, in some ways, Christianity, you know, our ancestors who didn't get killed, who ended up, you know, saying okay for their family's sake or for their own sake, that they conformed to Christianity, but they kept the religion, witchcraft, the spirituality. It's not a religion. I mean, Wicca is, but kept it open, kept it alive through Christianity. And things like October 31st being Halloween, us going around dressing like fucking ghosts and all these different things, you know, it's supposed to be a representation of, like I said, your ancestors coming back to visit you. So keep that in mind this Halloween that's coming up. Keep that in mind and leave something out for them. You know, like I said, you don't have to leave out a plate of food. That's traditionally what you do in some traditions. Now, depending on your tradition, you might have different traditions, and I don't want to be that guy who says, hey, witchcraft says this is what you do for the dumb supper. No, like I said, I learned, I got this from, I want to say, well, Birch and hoodoo books and shit like that is where I found when I wanted to look it up and make sure, you know, not to make sure Birch was all right, but just to see the source, to see where he got it. And he said, you know, the Druid Craft of the Wise, I think, DCW or whatever, was his parent tradition, was his first tradition. And he said, as, you know, the things he just considered witchcraft turned out to be now hoodoo. But he's always said witchcraft, so I don't want to be, you know, saying that this is witchcraft and then someone out there says this is hoodoo, and absolutely agree. I'm just saying I do it, and it doesn't mean I practice hoodoo, but I do a lot of things that come from hoodoo, such as, you know, I went over different baths. I played the Frater videos about baths. I think I played a Birch video about baths. But the uncrossing ritual, you know, Frater Xavier is a ceremonial magician, and he says in the uncrossing video that this is I think he says it's more witchcraft or Wicca or hoodoo. He actually says it's from hoodoo, and it's not actually something you do in ceremonial magic, but he says, having done it a few times, it says it's an absolute must. And it's absolutely essential. And so, you know, that's what I do with these different branches. I'm not going to say I'm this or that. I'm not going to pretend I know everything about this or that either. I'm just going to use what I know and put it into action. And hell, if it works and I get wisdom from it, you know, I can tell people, hey, I did it and it worked. And if I do something that doesn't work, well, then I have the choice to either not say it or go out there and say, hey, this didn't work. But to be honest, I'm not going to say most of the things I did worked, because, you know, that's inaccurate. That'd be a lying. I'd be trying to sound like I'm awesome, and, you know, that's not the case. But the things that haven't worked yet, you know, I might not remember all of them, and the ones I do remember are probably, what I do is I try to forget about it, so that the potential it could come back into play. You know, Birch and Frater also talk about when you let something go, you proclaim that it's done or it's not going to manifest. Well, then it might manifest, so maybe I should do that actually to make it come into light. But anyways, besides the point. So Today's the day I'm celebrating the massacre of the turkeys. And once again, I'm not going to give thanks because I don't want the Creator, the gods, all my spirits and ancestors around me. I'm coming out here and I'm not saying, like I said already before, I'm not pretending to be a guru or be all wise or all knowledgeable. But now that I know what I know, I can't distinguish if this holiday is something that we should be given thanks for, or if it's one of these things that are a trick to make us get bad karma, I guess would be the best way for me to say it. And what I mean by that is, I don't see how killing all these turkeys and eating them is going to give anybody any good karma after Thanksgiving, right? And whenever someone calls a fucking holiday Thanksgiving, it seems to me like they're trying way too hard to tell you that this is a good thing. Give thanks. They're hiding something. That's just my opinion. I have no facts. I mean, I can go through all the things that help me come to that conclusion, and it might make sense, and people might go along with it and whatever. But I don't think I'm going to do that because that's not exactly what I want to talk about here. But point is, I don't think cutting a tree down at Christmas time and putting it in your living room is good unless you specifically claim, dedicate, offer it to deity, spirit, gods, creator, whatever, or you're going to burn that bitch to heat up your house because, you use a wood stove or whatever, then that's okay. Like I said, I cut down trees. I had 3 trees in my garage. I made my wand out of that tree. I made a cup, a chalice out of that same tree. I used the sap to make oils out of that same tree. I used the sap for a few different things, actually. I used the pine needles in my bath, That tree has been used a lot by me. And I still have one more left, and that's the amazing thing about this pine tree. Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say there is, if you can't not cut down a tree, or whatever the case may be, your family's still into it, but you don't think it's right, well, after they cut down that tree, do not shoot to the road just to be given to a fucking tree company or garbage day or whatever the case is, and let it be gone to waste. Because like I said, the oldest tree that was in there was the first one I used, and I still have a full fucking bark, the main part of the tree, I guess, because I took all the fucking needles off all 3 of the trees. So yeah, the first one I used was it still had sap in it. They all still have lots of sap in it. That's just retained in there, I guess, and it preserves it. It's been preserved by this tree. Has been dead for 3 years now, and the sap is still alive in there. It's still usable, and it's being preserved by the tree. Is that tree still alive in my garage? I don't know. I mean, I can almost think it is. Maybe if I put it in the ground, it could grow again. I don't know, but I am going to use it. It's not going to go to waste. No part of it goes to waste. Using the saws to make the mercury, because I have carved mercury at the end of my wand, because air wand, right? It's for air, right? Mercury is the one I wanted to use there. Even though now my knowledge of it, mercury kind of combines everybody all together around. You got 7 planets there, right? That's an odd number, but 6 is a pretty good number right there. So at the top, like I went over this many times, but at the top you have both Saturn and the Sun opposing each other, and at the bottom you have the Moon and Jupiter, not necessarily opposing each other, but I don't like to think of that way, but I guess you kind of could. And the Sun and the Moon are kind of opposites. Saturn and Jupiter are kind of opposites, right? So you have these both at the top, and air and water are both kind of opposed to each other. So I like to look at it that way, and the middleman for all 4 of these fuckers is Mercury, in a sense. He can bring the Sun and Saturn together, just like he can bring Saturn and Jupiter together. So he's still air. That's still his main one, but Mercury also holds the caduceus, right, which has snakes on it. So a part of Mercury, there's connection there to water, to Scorpio, right? And the Moon and Jupiter, well, that's water, right? So That's how that connection is made there. But if you go across the other way, when you have Mars, which is male, which is, south, my right hand, basically when you're doing the lesser banishing, and then at your left hand, you have north, and north is Venus. Earth. So Earth and fire oppose each other, right? Because they're opposites, male and female. And once again, Mercury has that covered. Mercury is the middleman for that as well. Being genderless, it has both male and female parts. He can complete them, bring them whole. When you combine those two together, you can become Mercury, just like when you get your Sun and your your Sun and your Saturn in line, you're also good to go. Because Saturn's job is to restrict you. You need to find your limitation. And what I mean by that is, whatever you want to do. If you want to be a stay-at-home dad and use magic to make your money, which I've done for the last 3 years now, and now I'm back into the work field. But, whatever you want to set your limitation. If you want to be a business owner, you want to buy a house, you're setting a limitation there, saying, okay, I don't have this. This is what I want. So Saturn's saying, well, you don't have this because I didn't let you have this. And your Sun is saying, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to grab this, right? The Sun and Saturn's a circle. Sun is a circle with a dot in it. When you add Mercury to that, both those, first of all, if you put those on top of each other, it makes the number 8, which is Mercury's number, infinity, right? The Magician, which, the caduceus, 2 snakes on it, right? When you put those 2 snakes together, it also makes the number 8. 2 S's, right? Put 2 S's backwards, number 8. All right, on Saturn, right? He's got, if you look at the other symbol, it's like a cross with a little tail coming out of it, right? And you can kind of say that tail is kind of like a snake or whatever the case may be. But once again, you can add Mercury to that symbol and get a couple 8s that come out of there and stuff like that. But anyways, all this basically to say that, I put my 1 as Mercury because I was going to do every element. Every planet, I was going to have a spot for them on there because I already made these little symbols out of different metals for different planets, little sigils, when I was working with a planet and it was their day or their hour, or whatever the case is, and I wanted to do something for them. Well, I would use that and I'd put it with the candle or the incense or whatever offering I was giving them. That thing would be near it as a representation of me giving it to them. So essentially, these little pieces of metal that I made were extensions of the deities, of all the planets, and of the energies inside my body. So when I want my body or me to either remove something or get something, ask the deities in the skies or the deities that are within my body. Well, these were the representation of these parts, these energies within my body on my altar that I'm manipulating and giving an offering to show that I'm serious and that I believe that they are above me and I'm trying to understand them. And in return, I get what I want, basically. And this kind of plays into the whole idea that I tell you, magic works. It's effective, but it's not the only means of doing this. You can simply just have the mindset that whatever you think you get, put that programming in and do it. But the reason and this is just a speculation though, mind you, but I believe this works because it's like a reward system. It's the way we thought, right? It's King Solomon in the book. The thing I put on my last episode, it comes right out of the Bible. And it literally says King Solomon gave 1,000 offerings of fire, incense, burning things. I forget the actual word, but they literally said incense, candles, and a few other things. This is right out of the fucking Bible, and before the Bible got skewed and they changed it to, well, the priest does the ceremonies. You guys don't get to do any ritual or talk to these fuckers. We'll do it for you. Be good little sheep. Before all that happened, this was the norm. And by giving something that you perceive to be greater than you, something that you perceive that created you, lives inside you, is above and below you, by giving that force, okay? Because that force is above you, it is below you, it's all around you, and it's inside you, all right? But it doesn't mean like you get to just call on that little force that's inside you and command it what to do. But by giving that force, whether it's the Mars force, the Venus force, the Saturn force, whatever force you want to ask to take it easy on you or give you something or help you do something, by giving it something, well then, logically in your mind, it's more likely you're going to get something. If you just don't do anything for anybody and then ask for favor after favor, you know damn well it's not going to happen. That's why people manipulate, sob stories, play the victim, all this shit, because they don't want to give anybody anything and they want to receive. And that's the easiest way to do that. Go play victim, ask for donations, pretend this, that, blah, 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 blah. But it's only going to last so long. And the reason those people stay in victim mode is because they're taken from people without giving anything. So, yeah, the more they receive, the more it's going to be taken from them. And if they keep resorting to the same thing to keep receiving, and when I'm staying in victim mode, saying that all this bad shit happened to them, never taking ownership and always blaming other people, yeah, they're going to keep losing until they can't take it anymore and they finally change, or they blow their heads out, or they die some other way. But that's the vicious cycle you do not want to go into. First need to take ownership, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm talking about here. But anyways, all that just to say that I may not have put Mercury on my wand had I known that. And, I may just put that up there because, you can have multiple wands and shit like that. It could be just a show for respect for Mercury, and maybe that's why I have had so many successes having Mercury on that wand, because Mercury is the middleman for everything, But, anyways, because you have the air dagger and the fire wand, Mars would be on that wand, but, I could put Saturn on that wand, but that might restrict me, So I think Saturn would be more for the air dagger, and the sun would be for your wand, and then Mars would be for your fire dagger, and then your water chalice. Well, you might need to make two, one for the moon and one for Jupiter. And then over there on Earth, that's Venus straight up. So, and for that you make the pentacle. And once again, I also made that. Now, see, I got 3 out of 4 things all made out of wood there, right? Out of the same Christmas tree I used. And it's not stationary, not staying there, but I didn't want to waste it. That tree is technically part of the earth. It has, obviously, right, it has representations to, correspondences to Venus, being that it's green, it's a pine tree. That's fucking earth. It came from the earth, it grew in the earth. You know what I mean? It got cut down by a human, me, who was the earth. It was at my own hand that I cut it down. But the pine needles have a representation to Mars, Pine sol is actually the pine needles are I think it's Mars, and pine sol would be the lemon would be the sun. I think that's what it is. Frater talked about it, and that's where I'm pulling this knowledge out of. So don't quote me on that. Go check his channel and you'll figure it out. But anyways, all that just to say that if you can't not cut down your Christmas tree, make sure you do something good with it afterwards. Alright, so now on to, I'm going to slowly get into what I want to talk about. And it is, because I went over a few things about Mercury, about how I made manifestations, how I'm not a guru, how to look at your guru right, and then went over the dumb supper. So, I gave you a little bit of different things that have to do with witchcraft and ceremonial magic for anybody who's, a newbie and listening to my stuff because they want knowledge. And, my last video was my last one was Max Egan. I like promoting him. And you guys might wonder why I do that. And the short answer is in a video or something he produced either in 2016 or 2018. I can't remember. But he said he's on American Freedom Radio, and he uploads it to YouTube and wherever else it goes. And he asks, he actually says at the end of the video, and maybe I'll put the link on it here for you guys to listen for yourself, but he actually openly asks for anybody who wants to do that, go through the archives and take every one of his episodes and put it on there. Go for it. He has absolutely no problem with it. He actually wants people to do it. He just lacks the technology. And basically I just use, a specific app on the laptop that can record audio. Because it's radio, you don't have to actually see the pictures. But I also have a screen recorder as well on that, So it comes in very handy because I can record any video with the audio and replay it, put it on anything, basically. Take it right from YouTube, Because if you don't have YouTube, if you don't have the paid YouTube membership or the free trial, then you can't download it from YouTube. And if you do have the free trial and you download it, well, you lose those downloads if you don't keep paying the $14 or whatever. But with that app, which I don't think the newest version of the app has those things anymore, but I could be wrong. I know they still sell some that you can do that on, but technically I can take every fucking video I like on there, record it, and put it on a fucking flash drive and give it to whoever the fuck I want, and it's never gone. So, not something I'm going to do anytime soon, but if something happens, then something happens. But anyways, so I gave a bunch of, but the previous video, before my last one with Max Egan, I was very political about what I think Trump may or may not be doing right now. And, once again, I hope I'm wrong about that theory. And it's just a theory. And I hope by putting it out there, and if people get word of it, I don't even give a shit if people claim it's their theory and they didn't get it from somewhere else. I don't give two fucks. But if it gets out there, circulars, goes around, and let's say it was the actual intention of him to play this deception, well, then, he won't be able to do it if everybody's onto him. Everybody starts uplifting their person of choice that they want to win and get in the White House, well, then we won't have this fucking problem. So, ultimately, that would be the best outcome, and what I'm doing Magick to help happen, possibly, maybe soon. But, I kind of hope that happens. Like, I don't give a shit if anybody takes anything I put out here and fucking claim it to be their own and go out there and teach. I hope that. Come on. But that is ultimately my goal. Is if someone can take the stuff I do, they actually do it, and they go out and regurgitate it. Well, it's not really regurgitating it without knowing or having the wisdom, because if they do everything that I've said and watch the people I said to watch and, get the knowledge and the info, put it into practice, then yeah, fuck yeah. I don't give two shits. And I mean, that's basically how it works, right? Frater and Birch learn from somebody. They put out videos. A bunch of people watch them, buy the programs, learn from them. They go out and put out videos, and now I did the same thing. I learned from them, putting out fucking whatever you want to call this episode's podcast radio. I don't care, but so that's the point. This is the progression, right? As long as you don't just not actually, there's a different, you can tell when someone actually does something versus someone just speaking about something. So, anyways, but I forget where I was going with that. Sorry, I said Max Egan was on American Freedom Radio. That's where Santos Bonacci used to record. Max Egan surviving the Matrix. He was on a different radio show, and I can't think of the name right now. But anyways, so yeah, ultimately, I don't really give a shit. If anybody comes out and they start taking, my unique ideas that I've said about certain things, like, we're all cells of God. Basically, the trees, the grass, the ground, the insects, the animals, the earth, the water, air, elements and all the animals, and maybe even spiritual beings that all live around us are all in sync with each other and the earth, and us humans aren't. And we're kind of like the cancerous cells in our body that, because basically what happens, and I've already went through this, is one of my unique ideas that I'm trying to point out, but whenever you have a cancer cell, it starts becoming a tumor. What happens is, essentially, the cell has a consciousness. Doesn't mean it has intelligence or brain, anything like that, but it has its own. Every cell has its own unique consciousness, which is what's been baffling scientists and what they're continuously trying to understand. And because these cells keep reproducing and dying and rebuilding, and that's why you're, every 30, I'd like to say 33, but every 30 days or so, you get new cells which create your new organs, and that's why you don't have the same heart, the same lungs, the same blood, the same fingernails, the same hair, the same bones, the same kidneys as you did when you were a child. It's all new. So essentially, just like the trees and the grass and the insects and everything around, you can essentially live and reincarnate. Well, not reincarnate, but technically you're always having new cells which make new organs. So if you put in the right, food, material, sources, you breathe right, right water, right air, and you move your body around, exercise right, then essentially you could live a hell of a lot longer. I'm never going to say you could live forever, but you could live a hell of a lot longer than what we do now. And that's why our food, GMOs, are attacked. That's why our water, fluoride, is attacked. That's why our air, chemtrails, is attacked. That's why our fire, our motivation, our ambition, our passion, our ability to move around, TV, cell phones, video games, is attacked and keeping us lazy. And even the top point, spirituality, being the other element that's not fire, water, earth, and air, but earth would be the food I talked about, the air is the air you breathe, with the chemtrails, the foods, the GMOs, the water is the fluoride in the water that you drink, And then the fire would be your passion, what motivates you, what gets you up. You need a little bit of fire to fucking make you go somewhere, you know? What's your motivation? Go to work every day. Well, it's money, is it not? It's to pay for different things and shit like that. That's your motivation. That moves you, right? So you have that, but then once you come home, you got no fire to do anything else. You go to work and you come home and that's all you got. That's why there's this big, it's not even a conspiracy, but there's this idea, and it's floating around YouTube and it's everywhere, that you don't have to work to make a living. That working is the worst way to make a living. And, you know, if you go by the stats, people are making a lot more money doing and having other things, whether it's owning businesses, entrepreneurships, and it's, you know, different fucking commerce or affiliate markets and all these different sources of incomes. And yeah, they are killing the average worker. Not only that, there's less and less work for the average worker going to a factory or a warehouse every day because we're being outsourced by the technology that these people are creating. So eventually, we're not going to have that anymore. And anybody who can't do anything besides work in a factory with their hands, they may be out of a job. Probably not in, you know, maybe my lifetime towards my 60s, I could see that happening, or 50s. You know, anybody older than me is going to be okay, but anybody younger than me, assuming they're just going to work in a factory and be okay, well, they may not. You're going to have to find something equally, or something they like to do that they can profit off of. Once again, besides the point, but that's why everything is attacked. But if everything wasn't attacked, well, we could actually see how far we could live, how long we could live, you know, and if we didn't know that we died or expired or our organs, people seem to think that around 65 your organs start to get fucked up, your blood pressure starts to rise, you start to develop cancer, liver cancer, whatever, or you get Alzheimer's and all this shit. They think there's a time limit on it. This is a program running in someone's head, but yet there's 30 and 40-year-olds that have cardiac arrest all the time. There's been young people that have different mental illnesses that are very similar to Alzheimer's but aren't calcified as Alzheimer's, and they're getting it in their 30s and 40s. Now the suicide rate, the highest suicide age right now is 30. I think it's like 30 to 35. You know what I mean? So there's if people seem to think that their body only lasts so long, and it's bullshit. It only lasts so long because you put crap in it. Because every 30 days, you can look this up. It's right there. It's right in your regular media, too. It's one of those things they should teach us at school, but they don't. They teach us a bunch of crap that doesn't matter. But the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons we have 30-day months is to keep track of that cycle. All right? It goes by the moon mainly, but the moon is also helping you keep track of that cycle. I mean, every 30 days, you should be putting in good food, because what you put in is creating the next cells. And it's not a matter of, you know, once a month you got to eat good and then you're going to be good to go. These cells are always making new and being created new at different times. So whatever cells that create your kidneys are not going to be at the same time as the cells that are created to make your fucking toenails or your hair follicles or your blood or all that shit. Okay, it's at different times, so you need to be continuously eating well. And it doesn't mean you have to stop eating certain things. If you want to keep eating meat, go for it. But you need to even it out. You can't just eat meat and not have any of the good shit. You know, if you're not eating some of the worst or bad things for you, that are, you know, like different sugars and other things that are technically, you know, aren't good for us. Well, if you're only eating that crap and nothing good, then you're out of balance. You want to eat a lot of crap, that's fine, but even it out with eating a lot of good shit. So that at least you're not only making your organs with the crap. It's just pretty simple. You know, and you got to figure out how to get your water system. You know, if you're drinking out of the tap, well, you might want to test it. Your town might not be so bad. There's a lot of places in Europe that have banned fluoride in the water. You know, they don't have that problem anywhere. It is a toxin. It is a poison after all. It's a fucking metal. You know, it's not supposed to be in our water. So, and you know, anyways, I'm going off topic again. But the thing I wanted to talk about today, okay? So that's a little bit about, you know, that was my information, I would say, would be originally from me. That's one of the topics, but I have many things like that, right? And that plays into the whole we are cells of the earth, right? So because of the shit we eat, our cells develop cancer, and that cell, essentially, that consciousness of that cell believes it doesn't need the rest of the body, the rest of the cells. It doesn't need that. It feels like it's reached immortality. It feels like it can live without the host. But the cells cannot live without the host. Just like we can't live without nature or spirituality or creator. And you can say, well, yeah, people do it all the time. They're atheists. Yeah, but a lot of atheists, a lot of different people that don't have a religion, don't have a point, don't have a spirituality, commit suicide. Not all, but a lot of them do. A lot of them don't, and they live meaningless lives, and then eventually they end up finding something. You can say, well, I know tons of atheists. Sure, yeah, they can go through decades of being an atheist and not dying or perishing, but what ends up happening is they end up finding a passion, a purpose, a point to living. And your passion can become a spirituality. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to be a Buddhist. Oh, I'm going to be study witchcraft. Oh, I'm going to be fucking, I think I'm a heathen. Or, no, I'm going to be a Catholic or a Jew. No, it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. That's a misconstrued concept. Your spirituality can be anything. It's a point to live for. It's just recognizing the Creator. It's recognizing and being grateful. Keys are inside the house if you're looking for them. It's recognizing and being grateful for everything around you, for evening out your karma and shit like that, learning your life lessons and all that. Once you figure that out, you can do it for many means. You're going to be a Scientologist if you work out the crappy parts of that. You can be a Christian if you work out the crappy parts of that. You can be a witch if you work out the crappy parts of that. You can be a ceremonial magician if you work out the crappy parts of that. There's crappy parts of every fucking spirituality / religion. You can do whatever you want, but you have to find meaning in your life. And the meaning doesn't have to be all-powerful or spiritual. But the point is, when you find that passion and purpose, whether you believe in the Creator or God or not, when you find that passion and purpose and you start making it on there, I don't think you can do one without the other, but I don't know. So I'm just going to say this, that if you find your passion and purpose, then you're going to find a meaning in life, and you're going to realize that this all does have some kind of sense to it, that before you found this, whatever it is that you're doing, before you figured this shit out, that your life is pretty meaningless. And when you found this, you're going to see God, you're going to see love, you're going to see life, you're going to enjoy it, and it's going to be all worth it at that point. And if you didn't believe in a force, a creator, something that started all this, then yeah, you're going to you're going to realize it then. So that's that. But, the overarching tone was talking about how we're all cells of God, because God has experienced in this life through us is one of the things it says. We are all one is another thing that it says. So if you want to look at that concept that we're all one, and you put it in the perspective of, the human body. Okay, well, the human body is legs, it's hair, it's skin, it's blood, it's bones, it's water, it's a brain, it's organs, you know what I mean? But it's one body, right? But many things make up that one body. Well, the planet Earth, what is planet Earth? Well, it's earth, it's water, it's trees, it's people, it's cars, it's pollution, it's good, it's bad, but it's one Earth. Okay, well, what's the galaxy? Well, the galaxy is made up from stars, planets, asteroids, all this shit, but it's one galaxy. Well, what's space? Well, it's one space. It's one universe, right? And you can keep doing this over and over again. What's a car? Well, a car is fucking tires and engine parts, wipers, windows, doors, horsepower. And it's a radio. It's seats. But it's one car. Point is, there's many things that make up one thing, and that's what we are. We are many things on this planet making up one thing. We're our expression of our Creator, of the gods, of God, of our whatever made us. But we don't know it. The animals, the insects, the trees, the earth, they live in a state of perfection. Well, maybe not perfection, but in a state of, they understand it. They're in symbiosis. They're in cohesion. They're in cooperation and in sync with nature and the gods and goddesses and the deity and the creator of all, all is mind. Or that's the other perception. We're all in the mind of God. All in the mind of God, we're still all one, basically. But the point is that we're the ones that are not in balance on this planet, and this is why we don't reincarnate, we don't come back to life, we die, and we don't really know what's going on, we can't remember shit, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And we're like the crazy cancer cells in your body. Like I said, your body is all one, but it's a bunch of different things doing one thing. Well, if one part of your body has some cells that aren't reproducing, because your cells have to start, they're born, they're created, and then they grow to a certain point, and then they die off, but they don't die off before they create 2 more of those cells to replace it, in case one of them goes wrong or something happens to it, and this continuously happens. Well, when that stops happening in the right, proper way, well, then it fucks up whatever organ or system it's connected to. And basically those cells believe that they don't need any other cells or any other process or the rest of the body. They're their self. They've reached some kind of insane consciousness, basically, and it starts cancer, it starts growing. But basically, it's insane because as it grows, it doesn't kill itself off. It continues to grow. Those cells continue to keep growing and making this big bump till it kills off the host. And that's why it's insane. And we do the same fucking thing. We keep fucking talking about a bunch of crap. We say one thing and we do another. That's insanity. That's hypocrisy. We stay in our jobs complaining and wishing our life would change, and we keep doing the same thing and expecting change. How the fuck? That is actually the definition of being insane, is expecting different circumstances or expecting change while doing the same thing. How can anything change if the cause is always the same? You go to work, the effect, you get paid, you're unhappy. Cause, you go to work, effect, you get paid, you're unhappy. Cause, you go to work, effect, you become rich and have a house and cars just out of nowhere. No, that's not likely. It's not going to happen. Be real. Cause and effect. If your cause is you're going to work, but you start a ritual magic, then possibly you can change the effect. But once again, you had to change something. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. That is insanity. And everybody has a little bit of insanity in them because they think in some small, minute way, maybe something lucky will happen. They'll buy a lottery ticket. Some rich fucker's going to hand them cash, or someone's going to think they're talented, or whatever the case is. It doesn't matter. Someone thinks that at some point something good's going to happen to them and they don't have to go look for it. And that's wrong. I mean, there are cases where that happens, but you don't know if that person was studying magic and did a ritual. They're not going to fucking tell you that because they don't want people to either do it themselves or think they're crazy. But anyways, that's another one of my unique theories. And I don't give a shit if anybody takes these unique theories and puts them out there because I believe in them. So if someone takes it and spreads it and people start believing in it, okay, whatever. If they think some other person's a guru, well, then fine, Maybe that should have been my spotlight, but I don't give a fuck. If that person does well with my theories, then in turn I'm going to do well because I'm not looking for the fame and the fortune from this. I'm looking to help other people through my trials, tribulations, my good and bad projects and experiments. That's what I'm hoping to accomplish here. And I learn by losing. I learn by fucking up. I learn by failure. And every time I learn something, well, I'll put it out here for everybody to know. So the topic at hand. Okay, I'm going to put all that aside. Like I said, I don't give a shit. If anybody who's listening to this right now wants to put my theories out there or whatever, I don't give a shit. I don't think there's enough here for anybody to put out there. Because, in the beginning, I was kind of ramping up to something stable. And then I started giving the things I use for manifestations, which I haven't completely finished yet. And maybe that's how I'm trying to keep making people on the hook. But I went through some big things. I gave you guys the book that I used for the first one. Well, not the first one, the second one. First one was all done by just writing out what I wanted. But this is before I knew the no negatives things, but just writing out what I wanted, believing in it, using visualizations, and the feeling of love. Trying to keep fear far away when I'm thinking about manifestation. And every time I thought about that manifestation on purpose, do it before bed, visualize it as much as I can, use as much of my 5 senses as possibly I can, turn up the feelings of gratitude and try to act like it already happened. And the other thing was if I got this overwhelming feeling of love, happiness, when you get teared up from listening to a song or watching a movie, well, I would stop thinking about what was making that happen. Like, say if I was watching a movie, I would stop watching the movie, I'd turn around and I'd think about manifestation. I would do that as many times as possible, I'm not just going to waste that shit, I'm going to use that shit. So I gave you that, and then the second one was financial sorcery or sorcerer's secrets. Either one has the sigils in it that I use to get the next 10 grand, basically. And you can argue the point that, well, I was just getting the 10 grand 3 times from the first one, or from all these additional times. Fuck, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. All I know is these are all the ways I used it, and it worked. So today I want to talk about writing. You're going to hear a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff, and I'm going to put it after my talking in case you come to me for the talking. And if you're coming to me for the other people I put on here, well, the links are all there, so you don't even have to watch my shit if you don't want to. I'm not much of a salesman. I'm not much of someone who promotes himself or whatever. Like I said, I get enough ad revenue that covers the fucking... Well, it's now $20 a month for me for my package, but it covers it. I'm making $20 every month. Well, it's like 22, 24, something like that. And that's fine by me, I can go and spend that, but then I have to keep buying the package. And like I said, I may at some point re-record all my previous episodes, at least the most relevant ones. Maybe not the ones with the books and YouTube videos, because I can just link those out now. But everyone with information I think is prevalent and important, I'm going to redo and turn up the volume because they're very low in the beginning. And I may go down to the cheaper package, which I think was $7. I want to say. No, $7 was the, I don't know, man. Whatever one I got 45 minutes for. So, yeah, okay, I'm getting mixed up with prices. The $7 one is actually $13 for me, or something to that effect. It ends up being like 10 or 11 because I'm Canadian dollars and these are American dollars, and the next package is either $17 and it goes to 20, or I don't exactly know how it happened, but I may do that at some point. But there's really no need to because I got more than enough to keep covering these packages. It's just I find with the 3 hours I tend to put in a lot of videos, a lot of content that isn't mine, and I don't necessarily want to keep taking from the people I respect and putting their stuff on here for people to listen to instead of supporting them on via their channels or their programs or whatever. But I don't put anything out here like a program or anything I paid for out for free. Once again, you can argue, well, you're putting books out here for fucking free for people. Well, I got them for free. Oh, really? What the fuck is the difference? It's not like I paid for something and I'm putting it out there for free. That's violating rules. But if I found something for free and I put it out there, then how is that wrong? How is that bad? I don't know how that's bad. But there's a lot of books out there for free online. What's up now? Alright, sorry about that. My son was supposed to sleep over at somebody's house, but now it all fell through, so... But anyways, so yeah. What I'm going to be talking about today, and I don't know for how long, because I'm going to start getting ready there soon, and put out a lot of information already, but not necessarily what I want to talk about, but in the magical fields, in the sign of spirituality, if I go back to when before I got into ceremony magic, and before I started exploring witchcraft, when I was simply just New Age. Okay, I was told to write shit down. I multiple things told me to keep a dream diary. You know, there's a lot of New Age stuff that if you put most aspects together, especially the ones that you resonate with or intuitively know that, you know, are profound. But that's the problem, because when you first start in anything, you know, technically, if you don't know any better, you tend to just go with the information that you agree with. And you're not going to learn much if you're just agreeing with information, all right? But if you're starting to go New Age and thinking that you can attract things with your mind and believing there's power in your mind and all this, well, clearly you're thinking outside the box a little bit, because that's not really a notion now it's being a little more, you know, shot out there and popularized and probably extorted, or maybe not extorted, but explicit. No, I don't know. Anyway, it's being now it's a little more prevalent and it's almost a trend. So it's not going to work for anybody using it in that sense. But for the people who started in New Age things, and you know, so the point I'm trying to get at is that you probably might listen to some information that isn't always going to agree with you already. Hopefully, if you got into that stage. But that was the problem I had, because anything I didn't agree with, or you know, the person that I was listening to, who I trusted for other information, if they told me something was quote-unquote bad, had a perception or a program with something, then I would listen to it. And I avoided magic, different things around magic, and, you know, things like that at all chance. You know, the astrology things I would listen to because I was highly involved in that, but the tarot stuff I would avoid. And now I have a tarot deck, and I fucking love tarot. I love any kind of divination. I'm going to be doing a video about divination hopefully this weekend, because I got Monday off. I'm going to probably do that on Monday. But from scrying mirrors to your tarot, to your astrology, to your dowel, to fucking your fucking rune, all of it. But anyways, I would avoid all that shit. But you know, I would I tried to listen to what I liked. You know, there'd be a part of the day where I'd explore a bit, but then towards the end of the day, I would just listen to the same things over again, or similar things that I knew that I'd probably like. So that's kind of the problem. But there is, in the New Age, a lot of shit that is part of curriculum and part of magic, but you probably can't really decipher it all until you start going down this depolarization path and stuff. And besides depolarization and doing ritual and, you know, knowing that you have to accept and deny your thoughts, okay? the next important thing, I would say, or one of the most important things after depolarization and grounding and being grateful and all this and trial and error, okay, is the writing part. And I mean all writing parts of Magick. And that's not just necessarily having, this is one of the reasons I love what I do now, this podcast thing, because my creative process, it's another reason to write. And as I write, I get more information and I put things together. The more I write, the more, not necessarily wise, but the more all the information I have absorbed via YouTube, via internet, via books, via meditation, all the things I've taken together. When I start writing, they all come together in a way that I can see. And, it sometimes happens that way as I'm talking about it on here, okay? Sometimes I get these profound thoughts, but it's exponentially more intense and better, and I don't even know how to put it out part into words, but when I write down, because and that's the shitty part, is I don't like reading what I wrote down when I do these things. I've done it, I think, now for like 3 or 4 episodes, and when I listen to it now, if I don't remember, I can't really tell. But to be honest, if I know it, I can tell, and I hate it. But it still helps, because when I write it down, after I write it down, I think about it. It's in my head, and you're going to hear later some things that Jordan Peterson says. It's going to say basically what I'm saying, just in a different manner of speaking. But it's a good way to remember it. And so then when I start my podcast, I go back, look at my notes, and oh shit, I already covered all these things. And it was just like randomly and going on. But the dream journals, okay? The spell log / journal / keeping track of what you did, your spell work. You're writing down your information and taking in the books you need to write and all these things, and then writing down the residuals, everything, every part of this process. Keeping your regular journal, your dream journal, writing your own fucking book of shadows, writing all these things is so important, because I'm telling you right now, and I've known it for a while, but I've never thought about it in this context. But the reason that I think I got good at correspondences, putting things together, realizing things, how they're all connected and shit like that, the more I write, the better this happens. The more, because when I started, I couldn't speak the way I am. I have old videos that I've tried to post and I couldn't post. But I'm still working on that, and I want to put them out there for people to see. It's going to be embarrassing, especially the things I'm talking about, the way I talk and how I'm all over the place, even more than I am now. But I want people to see the difference from when I started this podcast to now, tone of voice and all that, and the way I speak. But I want them to see even from like 2 years ago when I tried and I fucking failed. Well, going by my own regulations and standards, but when I failed. I wanted to see the difference to now. And I'm telling you, most of that, okay, the depolarization and the accepting and banishing thoughts, the grounding, and all the different redoing programming on my mind is super, super important, because it allows me to understand and receive things better, You can't receive information from, whether you want to call it channeling or from certain books, if you have programming stopping you from either reading those books or hearing those spirits or staying in, like attracts like. So if you're not in, if your gauge for good and evil is very strict, right, and very small, like let's say good is all these things and evil is all these things, as you come into polarized, you can kind of skew that a little bit, and that means you can get more information easily, especially because you're still going to go from fear to love, those emotions. You're still going to go through that, but what I'm saying is, your opinion and your programming of everything that is accepted as what would be ideas that would come to you whenever you're in the fear mode are not going to be the same as they were before you were depolarized, okay? Because when you start to become depolarized, things don't matter anymore. You're not on the plus, because when you're on the plus, everything on the minus is bad and everything on the plus is good, right? But when you're in the middle, you can kind of see what's good about bad things, you can kind of see what's bad about good things and all the above. So you have this ability to be able to, no matter what mood you're in, you can kind of get thoughts from everywhere, which can be a great thing, but a bad thing at the same time. But at least if I'm in a shitty mood, I can still get good things to happen to me if I can manage to, be grateful and see what the positive side is. But anyways, so that's super important. But then after that, like I said, I think it's the writing. I think it's putting this shit down. It's taking the stuff you watch and learning. I'm not saying to sit there and start taking notes on every video, unless there's sigils and spells that you want and shit like that. But what I'm saying is after you hear the video or whatever the concept, then you write down what's important about it to you or things you need to remember. And besides that, more important is simply, taking a topic. Let's say you don't even have to start a podcast or anything like that. But let's say maybe you want to. Well, you would say, well, brainstorm what is the most important thing you think you need to do when starting your initiation. Maybe it's getting the book, maybe it's reading the book, maybe it's, the depolarization, maybe it's finding a temple, all this shit. Well, that could be your first episode, or it could be an introduction to you and how you got into this. But you start writing that, and you're going to see how you're going to get, you might have the idea of doing one specific thing. All right, this episode is going to be about this. But as you go, there's going to be so many ideas that come to you. And like I said, the more you do this, at first you might get one or two ideas, and it's going to be profound. When things just click and things flow to you, and you don't even understand how they're coming to you. I mean, I wrote this thing about this dream I had when I was in Atlantis, and man, I still have it. It was crazy. But anyways, the more you do this, the better it gets, and it's super important for everything. And Jordan Peterson is going to tell you how reading, but mainly writing, is one of the best things you can do. It's like having a sword or a fucking M16 or an 8K or a fucking bulletproof vest. It's the best thing you can do because writing increases your intelligence. Writing, and he's dumbfounded by how many people don't know this and why they don't teach this. But it's one of those skills that the more you write, the smarter you get, the more intelligent you get. Because if you're absorbing knowledge, that's great, but that's got nowhere to really go. Once you put it on paper, then you can really remember it, because you can read a book and you can conceptualize it, and you can, it's in your mind and all that. Like I said, eventually that information is going to come back to you. And what happens is whenever you're writing, okay, because channeling, when it comes back to you, and I'm saying it on these podcasts, well, that's great because it's there. It's there. I have it. It's there, okay? But, I have to play it to listen to it and shit like that. But when I write it, all right, all these ideas stay in my head. They stay there. They get anchored in there by how I'm going to put it together, how I'm going to use it in a practical way, or whatever correspondence I use. So what's happening is all the information that's in your head that has to do, it's like this like attracts like thing again, right? If you're in a certain mood or feeling, then you're only going to get certain ideas, right? Like I said, well, when you're in that mood, and you're writing down, well, all the things, all the knowledge, everything that has to do with that is going to come to you. And not only that, you're going to get correspondences that are going to take you other places, and you're going to connect it, and you're going to seem super intelligent, and you're going to get better and better and better at it. Writing is so important. And it wasn't until like the last few days when I watched the first episode on, because I thought it was a book list that Jordan Peterson had, and I was going to go get them all, and I was going to read them all. And he does tell you stuff about books and how everybody should, even if you don't like or are not Christian or whatever, everybody should read the Bible. And one of the reasons is our law is based on it, our life is based on it, especially if you're in like the States or Canada, but everything we do is wrapped around that Bible. It comes from the Bible, you go to court, you gotta swear on the Bible and shit like that, even if you're not fucking, religious, or at least a Christian. So he says everybody should read that, but what you're going to hear is how important, how it worked for him, and how much you can improve yourself by writing. And to me, this is not only just for becoming smarter, getting a better job for university students. This is for magical practitioners, because if you want to get profound knowledge from yourself, because this keeps saying, everybody says all the information you're ever going to need, all the wisdom you're ever going to need, everything you ever need to know is inside you. You just need to connect to it, right? So you don't watch anything, you don't do anything, whatever. You just meditate. Well, how's that going to do anything? You might get some profound pictures, some profound thoughts come to you, but if you don't start writing, okay, and that's why automatic writing is the beginning and one of the best ways to start channeling, okay? But that's why it's so important, because all the knowledge you already have in your head. Let's say you never open a magic book, but you hear this podcast for some reason and you say, okay, if you just start writing right now, everything you've ever heard before or done or learned, it's going to start coming out in that paper in one way or another. Your first time might not be great, but you're still going to have something happen profound. You're still going to start writing about something and shit's going to happen. Now, if your mind is on other things and you're not fully there, you know what I mean? Well then, yeah, don't expect anything good to happen. If you're doing it because you don't want to, but you want the results, so you kind of force yourself to do, kind of like when I say if you give money, you're going to get money, or if you're doing it under protest, don't expect the results. Same thing with this. If you're doing this just because I'm telling you to do it, don't expect to get anything from it. But if you do it and you got no one around, no noise or whatever, you put on maybe some 432, or you put on, meditation music, whatever. You do whatever you can do. It doesn't matter if you've been researching shit or not. If you do this, at least everything that's floating around in your head right now is going to get down on paper. It's going to get kind of like an organized, that's what I said, accepting and rejecting thoughts is kind of like everything that's in your head over and over again from programming and seeing the same shit over and over again. These things are around in your head, in your subconscious. Your subconscious releases them to you depending on what feeling you're in, love or fear. And, you might think you're redoing the same thoughts over and over again, but really you are, but it's because you have the same experience over and over again. So you get rid of one by rejecting one bad thought, but then you got another experience that you experience the same thing. So you got to reject it again. But eventually you're going to get through it all and you're going to get rid of it. And when you accept certain thoughts, you're telling your subconscious, okay, no, this is important and this isn't important. So the things you say to your subconscious that are important, it plays out. So if you don't know this and you go around saying stuff like, I'm never going to be, R-I-C-H. I didn't want to say it, but, and stuff like that, or you start cursing yourself in all these different ways, and you have the same thoughts, you know what I mean? You're basically accepting them by allowing yourself to, be in a shitty mood about it. But if I get a thought saying, I'm never going to be popular or have a good podcast or anything like that, I'm going to say, no, I reject that thought. And I'll move on. And like I said, I'll even add sometimes I reject that thought and accept the thought that I'm going to be a super success. I will leave, harm-free, so mote it be. Name. Magical name or a regular name. Well, the same process with the writing it down. Now, if you're in a bad mood and you start writing down all your bad thoughts, then, I would assume that that's going to be like accepting those thoughts. So after you're done, you might want to say, all right, on that page, I banish, and then fucking fire it up. But don't take my word for that. Do some research on that because, by putting them down on paper, you're affirming that stuff that you don't have, that you want to have, and you don't want the universe to think all those things put on paper is like a spell and you put it up there. So I would suggest to not do the writing while you're upset. However, if you're trying to work out an issue that is built around programming, then absolutely you should. But once you're done writing all the bad shit, go and say, I forgive whoever harmed you in this. I let it go. I'm no longer allowing this to affect me. By putting them down on paper, you're affirming that stuff that you don't have, that you want to have, and you don't want the universe to think all those things put on paper is like a spell and you put it up there. So I would suggest to not do the writing while you're upset. However, if you're trying to work out an issue that is built around programming, then absolutely you should. But once you're done writing all the bad shit, go and say, I forgive whoever harmed you in this. I let it go. I'm no longer allowing this to affect me, affect my being, to leave me in a negative charge. And I want this person to thrive. And I wish this person to become a success and have health and wealth and a big house and, all that shit. Even if you don't meet it, you should still write it down. And every day, maybe you don't have to write down the bad shit every day, but every day, read what you wrote and then write down good shit to that person. And eventually, you will forgive them and let it go. And then you can move on. But you don't want to just write that down once and then burn it or get rid of it and then you put it out there in the universe and that shit all comes back to you. But whenever you're in a good state, all the good shit's going to come to your mind and it's all you're going to get is good things. You don't even have to say you accept it, but you're writing it down, you're anchored in your mind, and now these are going to be part of like your core knowledge. And you're making more room for more stuff to come in. But anyways, I got to start getting ready. I have a hell of a lot more to say about that. I hope that was helpful. And whatever I didn't say, Peterson's going to say so much better than me. Keep in mind that this isn't just to be a good student, a good teacher, to have a great tool. It is, but it's also going to help you magically. It's going to help you be and learn the stuff that you don't understand. All right? If you can't remember astrology correspondences, but you really want to be an astrologer, or the same with tarot, there's so many cards, how are you going to know them all? Well, here's the way. And you don't even have to write about tarot. You don't have to write about astrology. Just start writing and things are going to come to you. You're going to start talking about a situation, then all of a sudden you're going to think, okay, well, this situation is something to do with Mars. And then boom, that's anchored in your head forever. You don't ever have to look at that again. You're going to know Mars attributes or is whatever you just figure it out in your head. And as you go, you're going to do that for every planet. And then you're going to have those correspondences down. And then you're going to get more in depth. And then you're going to have double planet correspondences. Same thing with tarot. Same thing with everything that you have trouble remembering. It's because you're trying to remember it consciously. Let your subconscious do the work. First, just start writing. Your subconscious is going to keep releasing that information for you to accept or to understand. And if you're in a good, positive feeling vibration, you're only going to get good shit. So you don't have to worry about accepting negative shit. And it's just going to flow, and it's going to help you so much. Mark my words. It's going to help you so much. Because sometimes I wake up and I can't believe, like, anything someone says to me, I can kind of come up with, like, a spiritual correspondent, or have a resolution for it. Not only one, sometimes I'll have both sides of resolution. That's another thing. That's something I'm going to talk about later. But Peterson starts going about how he tears things apart. So, take an idea and try to do the pros and the cons of that idea, or figure out multiple different ways it could be, taken or figured out and shit like that. And that's another thing that I did, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. But it's super helpful. But anyways, I think I'm going to leave it at that for today. I hope I didn't offend anybody by the turkey fucking massacre shit. I do wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, but like I said, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. They call it Thanksgiving and we're killing turkeys. So, if anything, if you're going to have a turkey, all right, dedicate it to your deity, especially if you're cooking it, doing stuff to it, Say something like, I wish this animal didn't have to die, but it had died, so we're going to honor it by eating it, enjoying it, thanking it, loving it, dedicating it to deity, whatever you got to do, okay? I'm not going to eat the fucking bird, but I still might say something like that for my family's sake. But yeah, do something and try to make it, Don't just be like, well, this is society and it's the way we are, so fuck it. If we're all going down there, at least we're all going down. No, you guys can all go down. I ain't going down with you. Fuck you, bud. I'm going up. One day you're going to fucking be... I'm going to be part of a lesser banishing, and you're going to look in between fucking Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael. I'm going to be right there. It's going to be Archangel Ceremonial Witch. And I'm going to be the color fucking, I don't even know what, but I'm going to be moving up. I'm just kidding about that part, but I'll be moving up the hierarchy, bud, next time around. I ain't staying in this dense bullshit. As much as I love my family and I love my wife, I think she might too. And like I said this in a previous video, you don't have to do this to move up. You don't have to be doing spirituality to move up. But it helps the process, transformation. It helps with the unknown. It helps understanding all this. And it helps, it just helps. It helps, you have to put up with this realm and understand what the process is. And writing is also going to help with that. So, but anyways, like I said, someone could be just a pure heart, do good things for people, and understand that they don't need a cop tell them what to do, and be grateful even when they're down, and never try not to curse themselves. And, everybody's got a little bit of shit in them, but if someone understands that and chooses not to do it anymore, and whenever they're faced with that, and, they have their chance to be malevolent, this is part of the dark side work, by the way, but when you have that chance to do something bad, and you perceive there's no repercussions, and you can't get caught, well, most people that don't have their bad side in check, we're going to take that. They're going to take that opportunity, and then from there, they may become a monster, or they may understand and learn from that lesson. Sometimes it takes that. It certainly has for me. But that's the difference. Once you go through that and you realize you have that potential, then you make sure you either never get in those situations, and if you get in those situations, you never go there again, because the idea of what you can become is scarier than the idea of that person, whatever they did to you, for you to try to fucking kill them, fuck them up, whatever the case is. Anyways, and I'm going to come out with a video soon too about practical steps and easy things to do to touch your dark side or your shadow work to start, and little simple things like when you're a kid, right? When I was a kid, The Simpsons were bad, South Park was bad, Marilyn Manson was bad, okay? There's many more than that, but that's just 3 things, right? So as an adult, that's still with you. Now, consciously, you may have watched South Park, and you may have watched The Simpsons, and you understand they're not bad, and it was just teachers and people probably trying to be good because they thought it was bad. In South Park, to a small child, it's probably not the greatest for them to watch. So you can kind of understand it and all that. But if you never actually got rid of that programming, that, whatever, then that could be kind of, this is more corresponding than anything, but this could be part of your dark side. If you never actually go listen to Marilyn Manson's music and you just keep understanding and thinking he is bad and the devil incarnate, and that he actually took his lower ribs out to suck his own dick, and that he's gay and all this other shit, if you never actually go listen to him, man, you're missing out. Because I fucking love Marilyn Manson. He's got so many songs packed with esoteric knowledge, and he's got a song said, "I'm not a slave to a God that don't exist." You know what I mean? What do you think that means? It doesn't make him, I mean, maybe he is atheist, but it doesn't make him an atheist with that statement. He's telling you that the Christian God is not his God. He's not a slave to that motherfucking God, right? He's, and I've said it before, you don't have to worship any God. All you have to do is honor them, be grateful to them, understand their role in your life, and do your best to give them shit so they give you shit. But he's got many songs. I watched an interview where he talks about putting binaural beats into his songs and shit like that. And he talks about Magick and a bunch of shit, you know what I mean? But yeah, for the longest time I thought he was probably a bad guy, a bad dude, and I wouldn't even look at him. But he was the kind of guy that if I started watching his video, let's say by accident, I couldn't turn it off. You know why? Because I was drawn to it. That's what the dark side is. We're drawn to your shadow side. We're drawn to our dark side. We're drawn to this evil and stuff like that. That's why we watch movies with killing and hate and all this shit, because we're drawn to it. And sometimes it's the closest we can get without doing anything, and that satisfies us, right? And, we're fine watching someone else do it and shit like that as long as it's not us. But to understand that you can also do those horrifying things is a hell of a realization, and most people can't deal with that. And that's when post-traumatic stress happens, is when someone actually does do those things and they realize they're capable of that, and it fucks with their programming, thinking they're a good person and all that. I mean, this is a very simplified version of how I interpreted one of the ways of, a soldier getting PTSD. But, so, something like Marilyn Manson that maybe you still don't like now, even though you think you're depolarized and balanced. Well, if you're depolarized and balanced, why can't you go watch somebody that you may think is evil? You think you're depolarized and balanced, but are you going to go watch Aleister Crowley's really dark stuff where, he claims to be, whatever? Or are you going to go watch somebody like E.O. Quetting? I got nothing against the guy either. I think he's great. I've read lots of his books. Same with the other guy. I can't think of his name, but he's got a lot of got good books too I've read. And these guys, if you're depolarized and balanced, there's no issue, right? Reading these books. But you're still staying away from them. Why? Well, because you're scared of your dark side. You're scared of it. You don't want to go look at that shit and end up liking it or being repulsed by it. Well, that's polarity. You think it's good or bad. You need to understand that it's neither. Now, I'm not saying to go read a bunch of books, especially books with demon sigils in it, and that get yourself into trouble. But, on a very simple way, you can start exploring your dark side as anything as a child. And I'm going to use Manson again, and I got nothing against Manson. I really like his songs. I got a shitload on my thing. He's got a song called Saturnalia, which, if anybody doesn't know, Christmas used to be called Saturnalia. It was a Roman holiday that day. Anyways, look it up, but I'm not wrong about that. That's right. And, think about that. Saturnalia. Anyways, so you start exploring these things and telling your mind that it's okay. They're not bad. Okay, that's exploring. That's one way to start exploring your dark side. That's not all of it. That's not all inclusive, and that's not going to take you to where you need to be. But it's a good way to start, and from there, you should be able to figure out the rest, especially if you start the writing process, as I told you about. But you should be able to start going along, read Young, Peterson. Like I said, I'm going to do a video about that soon too. But anything that you perceived to be bad and was scared of or told not to do as a child, well, first of all, it's going to make you want to do it, right? Which is part of the dark side as well. It's not just about the bad things like Hitler and all that shit we couldn't do as a person. It's about all the shit we were told we couldn't do that we want to do. And mainly because of that, we're told not to drink and do drugs, but most kids do. And it's because it's told not to, and that's perceived as a dark side thing and all that. But once you take the don't do drugs away, like places where they've legalized all drugs, prostitution, drinking, people don't even want to do it. Not even one bit. So anything that you think is bad or you shouldn't do any of that, explore it, Don't dive in, but make yourself uncomfortable. It's the same thing. You can only learn by putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. You can only learn by watching things that aren't in line with your belief systems. You need to break those belief systems. Now, you probably have some that serve you, so you don't want to break those. But how are you going to know if something serves you or doesn't serve you? You are tainted. You are not polarized, but you're biased because you think you got the answers. You think you're right. Most people do. So the only way you're going to know is if you subjugate and put stuff on that is opposed to you. And from there, with your newfound knowledge, with the writing and all this shit being depolarized, you're going to find some middle ground. You know, the things that we were told were bad as a kid, especially if it has something to do with going around killing people and stealing and shit like that from, good people. And yeah, they're still going to be bad. There's still going to be things you shouldn't do. But by exploring it, understanding it, knowing that, by you going out and passing judgment on somebody who's stealing, you don't know their circumstances. They could be stealing to pay for Christmas or pay for their kids, whatever, or just to eat, Not every act that we say is bad, stealing is bad. Well, not every person who steals is necessarily a bad person. And if you put yourself above that person, well, that's going to fuck you up. You can't do that. Thou shalt not judge. You'll be judged with the same amount of judge you cast upon whatever person. That's paraphrasing, but that's what I mean. So go over all the things that you think you were told are bad that you might not be scared to go against. Facing your fears, like I said in a previous episode, is another way to test your dark side. Like I said, I was scared my first time around. I was scared of spirits, seeing a fucking ghost, something like that, an ancestor and all that. And I had to face that, especially for this line of work, for doing what I'm doing now, for talking and doing magical ritual and all this shit. I totally had to face that, right? Or I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be just a fucking, another person at work somewhere and would have dropped all this and thinking in the back of my head, like, fuck, what if that was the way, What if I should have did that? But anyways, that's part of it, right? Like, I'm not saying going over the things that you're scared of or told were bad as a kid is only, and that's how you do shadow work. It's one aspect that I use to go and start my shadow work. Just like first time I had to face my fear, figure out what's the best fear, biggest fear, and it had something to directly do with what I was learning. And it was one of those other things I kept avoiding. All the things that have to do with spirit. And if you're in magic and you're avoiding spirits, things that have to do with channeling and seeing spirits and all that, well, you're going to have a hard fucking time. So I faced that head on, So anyways, start listening. If you were told Manson was bad, you still think Manson's bad, listen to some of his stuff. Maybe before you listen to his music, watch a video or an interview of him, you know what I mean? When the Columbine, he got blamed for that because the guys were wearing shirts, but they weren't even fans of his, okay? They didn't even like Marilyn Manson, but they wore his t-shirt before they killed everybody and killed themselves. And, he got blamed for that and all that, and they wanted to do an interview. He refused all interviews, but the one thing he said was, well, what would you say to the people? What would you say to those kids, because obviously you influenced them and all that, and he never even, from what I saw, he never even said, I didn't influence them, they weren't fans. He was never insensitive or anything like that. He said, I would listen to them. They were probably going through a tough time. They needed to talk, and their parents, their teachers, no one fucking would listen to them. So I would listen to them and let them work it out. There's not much more profound shit than that. And this guy was demonized and demoralized and all that. No, he's expressing himself. He was fucking facing his dark side by going out and being a dark figure, by using Marilyn Monroe and fucking Charles Manson in the same fucking name. He was being as dark as he could be. He was acting that out. So he wouldn't have to act it out in life. And you could say, well, maybe that's not appropriate, maybe that's good, maybe that's not bad, maybe he's repressing it. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It matters about what you're going to do. And he's doing pretty well for himself. So if you say he's repressing and all that, well, I don't know. His magic's working, and you're listening to me, so maybe yours isn't working too well. So you might want to go listen to Manson a little bit. But anyways, hope everybody enjoyed this. Stay tuned. Monday I'll probably be back on. Might put something on tomorrow too if I got a chance. But yeah, have a good day.
One that I wanted to ask you last time, but we didn't have time to get to it, and one that really piggybacks off what you were just talking about, how there's different ways to explore the world, one of them being reading. And I think that's one very, very important and timeless way of exploring the world. What do you think about this phenomenon? Less people are reading. Like, it feels like almost nobody is reading per capita. What do you make of that? Do you see that as an existential crisis?
No.
What do you make of it?
No. Well, reading for pleasure has always been a minority occupation. Like, most people don't read for pleasure. Of the people who read for pleasure, only a small proportion buy books. Of the people who buy books, only a small proportion buy difficult books. It's a specialty market, and I don't think that's changing. What I do see happening, though, is that is being expanded in surprising ways by such things as YouTube videos and podcasts.
So you can find the value in something like that is just as valuable as something you could possibly find in a book.
Well, I think that the two technologies have their advantages and disadvantages. The thing about a book that you can't get from a discussion is that a book is like a portrait as opposed to a photograph. A photograph, it's click, That's that. A portrait you layer on and layer on and layer on and work over on for weeks. You still have the same single image, but there's this depth to it. And a book enables you to think and then rethink and think and then rethink. And so you can go deeper in a book than you can, I would say, in any other medium.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean you can't go deep in a podcast. And it doesn't mean that there's no educational utility in podcasts. Plus, there's audiobooks, right? And
Sure.
people are listening to those.
Well,
like
that was
mad.
another question. Do you think that audiobooks are just as valuable as books?
Oh, sure.
Just
Sure.
as good?
Well, the thing is, if you can really read, you can read way faster than you can listen. So reading is more effective, except that, and this is what's cool about podcasts, and what's game-changing about them, I would say, is you can't read while you're driving.
Yeah.
You can't read while you're doing the dishes or exercising. And so all of a sudden with the podcast world, people have all this time that was used maybe listening to music, which is fine, right? But lots of people now are listening to like difficult podcasts.
Yeah, educational ones.
Yes, and long, detailed discussions about political issues that was never possible with television or even with radio for that matter. So, and people say, well, young people have a fragmented attention span. It's like, well, yeah, but Joe Rogan does 3-hour podcasts, and
Right.
those do just fine. And your
Right.
podcast is how long usually?
They're long, 2 hours,
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not for a fragmented attention.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
no, I
But
think it's good.
You're absolutely right. I think the number one person who listens to this podcast and podcasts in general are people who are occupied doing something else.
Yep. Yep.
And I think you're right. That's really valuable to be able to utilize that space.
Definitely. It's found time. And so
Right.
that's why the podcast market, I think, has exploded. It's like, oh, look, I can make use of commuters.
Right.
People spend thousands of dollars a month in their time commuting. It's like, poof, all of a sudden you can make that. You can take a university degree while you're commuting, essentially,
Right.
in terms of the knowledge that you can attain.
Sure.
So I'm not pessimistic about that at all.
And
That's
also
nice to
the
hear.
way that you have been using YouTube with your content is kind of amazing.
It's yeah.
The way that there's hundreds of thousands of views on your lectures and
Yeah, and they're difficult.
I
mean,
Yeah,
one
they're
of the-
difficult
Yeah, and
lectures.
long.
Like they push me when I'm lecturing, and they're long. That's
Yeah.
right. And there's a big market for high quality educational material. So, or
think-
demanding educational material, let's say.
One of the brilliant things you've done is you market yourself really well, and to the new media, I think, where your contemporaries weren't doing that.
right.
And so you really broke new ground with that. And I mean, it's paid dividends for you, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's part of my insane curiosity, and I've always learned. It's this same thing we were talking about 10 minutes ago. It's like,
yeah.
I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I've always felt like a complete idiot when I started doing them, because that's why Carl Jung said, for example, that the fool is the precursor to the savior. You have to be willing to be a fool to advance, because when you first move in your new direction, what the hell do you know? You're just a bumbling dimwit, but you won't be that for long.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Whereas if you stay in your little safe place, your little safe space, let's say, then, something will get you sooner or later. You can bloody well be sure of that. But temporarily you're safe. Well, that's not helpful. And so when I started, it started when I started talking to journalists. They would phone me and I would talk to them. And most of my colleagues they'd usually say something dismissive about journalists, like, well, they always get it wrong. It's like, well, first of all, there's no they. And what makes you think you're important enough to pay attention to anyways? And if they get it wrong, maybe it's because you didn't explain it very well. And the journalists would call and I'd talk to them. And, well, then they'd offer me an opportunity. So I got an opportunity to go on a TV show. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll go do that. And so I did that and it worked pretty well. And then I got an opportunity to do some more. And then I was on a regular on a TV panel news show in Ontario. And then I got this little 13-part series that they made out of my courses and started doing public lectures, and those all worked. And then I thought, oh, well, what the hell would happen if I put these on YouTube? There seems to be a market for them. But it was pretty amateurish.
Do you think that whole journey started by just taking the call from that first journalist?
Oh, sure. But taking it in a particular way. It was the same way that we're having this conversation. I thought, well, a journalist has a question. I'm not doing anything expedient. I'm not saying, well, I'm hoping that something will come of this. I didn't have a specified goal in mind. I thought, let's have a conversation.
And
let the chips fall where they will. Yeah. And so, and one of the things that distinguishes me, I would say, from many of my colleagues, and perhaps from many people, is that generally when someone comes along and says, well, would you like to do this? I'd say, okay, like, let's give it a try. And I don't expect that I'm going to be particularly good at it. How would I be? I'm certainly not as good at it as I'm going to be, that's for sure.
Right.
You know, because obviously when you first start something, you're just not that good at it. But, you know, like I felt like a fool when I first started to practice as a therapist, or when I first started to lecture, when I first started to work as a business consultant, when I was designing software, when I was going on, you know, starting to do media events. It's like, what the hell do I know? I don't know how to do this. It's like, whatever, man. It's like, move ahead.
Or when you first uploaded to YouTube? Did you?
Yeah, well, and I mean, you know, the channel kind of limped along for a while. I mean, it depends on how you measure it. But, I mean, when I really sat up and paid attention was in April 2016, the views hit the 1 million mark. And I thought, million, eh? What does that mean? And I really thought about it. I thought, 1 million's a lot. If I sold 1 million books, it's like, that's when you do the little touchdown dance, right? At the end of the field. Because that just doesn't happen. And I'd never write a scientific paper that had 1 million views. That just never happens, ever, not once, right? Then you think, well, if you talk to 50 stadiums full of 20,000 people, you think, that's noticeable, right? That's noticeable. Yeah. I thought, 1 million. And people were watching the lectures, like their long lectures. They were watching. It wasn't just 30 seconds. They were in there. Like some people would browse and pop out, but lots of them were watching them right to the end. And so I thought, all right, what the hell is this YouTube thing? Anyways, what is this?
Yeah, I know.
It's not cute cat videos. It's, and then I thought, oh, I get it. I see what it is. It's like the invention of the printing press. It's that big. For the first time in human history, the spoken word has as large a reach and as long a duration as a book.
Right.
Like, that's never happened, period.
It's a great analogy.
It's amazing. And then that just blew me away. I thought, oh, this is a Gutenberg revolution. This is a big deal. Great books. Really, man? You've got this 4-year period that has been carved out of your lives by society. It's given you an identity, like a high-quality identity, and freedom at the same time. Man, you're not going to get that again in your life. You've got a respectable identity, university student, and complete freedom associated with that, or as near as you're ever going to get. And you've got these unbelievable libraries that are full of the writings of people who are intelligent and articulate beyond comprehension. And, you know, and you can go there and you can learn all this. And you might think, well, why should you learn it? Well, you learn it to get a job, or you learn it to get good grades, or you learn it to get a degree. And that's all nonsense. It's nonsense. The reason that you come to university to be educated is because there is nothing more powerful than someone who is articulate and who can think and speak. It's power. And I mean power of the best sort. It's authority and influence and respectability and competence. And so you come to university to craft your highest skill. And your highest skill is to be found in articulated speech. And if you're a master at formulating your arguments, you win everything. And better than that, when you win everything, everyone around you wins too. Because to transform yourself into, let's consider your transformation into something approximating the logos. It means you shine a light on the whole world. Well, there's nothing more exciting to do than that. There's nothing better you can possibly do. And to think that you're coming to university to be, trained to have a job, it's like, great, that's a hell of a lot better than being unemployed and covered with Cheeto dust while you're snacking away in front of your video game in the basement. But it's not and I don't have anything against video games, by the way, but but it's hardly a triumphant call to being in the world, and that's what university should be calling forth. It's like, God, you people, I know what Harvard students are like. I taught here for 5 years. You people are spectacular. You're spectacular. You're all capable of being world beaters. You transform yourself into something that's articulated and sensible and grounded in history and knowledgeable and wise, man. You can do anything you want, and hopefully anything you want for good. Because if you have any sense, everything you want to do would be for the good, because there's nothing more compelling or meaningful or or useful in combating the tragedy of life than to struggle with all your soul on behalf of the good. And the universities have forgotten that. It's why everyone's bailing out of the humanities, and they should. The humanities are corrupt. And they're corrupt because they're not telling students this. It's so bloody obvious. It's like, learn to think, learn to speak, learn to read. It makes you a superpower, an individual superpower. You have, and I don't understand why that isn't just told to students. It's not that hard to understand, and everyone wants to hear it. It's like, really, I could do that? I could do that? It's like, yeah, really, you could do that. And the whole society around you has labored for really thousands of years to provide every single one of you with this spectacular opportunity that you have while you're undergraduates and graduate students here. Man, everyone's just praying that you would come here and manifest everything that you could manifest. And that's what you should be doing instead of waving placards and complaining about how you're oppressed, for God's sake. You see these Yale students complaining about their oppression. It just leaves me aghast. It's like, just don't understand what's happened to the universities. I can't believe that you're not told when you come the first day, look, man, you're here on a heroic mission. You're going to take your capacity to articulate yourself to levels that are undreamed of. You're going to come out of here unstoppable. You're going to be able to do anything you want. It's like, that's what you're here for. Instead, you're taught that, well, the world's a pretty oppressive place, and you're probably the bottom of the victim pile, and there's virtually nothing you can do about it except deconstruct the patriarchy. And it's so weak-kneed and so pathetic that universities should be embarrassed that that's what they're peddling to students. I'm embarrassed by it. I've gone on public record telling parents, bloody well send your boys to trade school because at least they'll learn something useful. And that's a terrible thing for someone like me to say, because I do believe that that being articulated and educated in the highest possible manner there's nothing that's better for you and for society. And why have the universities forgotten this? Well, that's postmodern neo-Marxism for you, then the philosophy of intense resentment and oppression and group identity, and God, it's just pathetic.
The cards? Shit.
Great admirer of the humanities, and of the universities. I mean, the humanities, you learn to be a citizen through the humanities. The humanities are at the core of Western culture. If they go, we're in trouble. So the problem is that what's manifesting itself as the humanities in the universities is no longer the humanities. It's something almost virtually the opposite of that. And so when I tell people not to go to humanities courses in the universities, it's with a very heavy heart, believe me. Now the question is, where do you go instead? Well, that's a good question. You can always read. One of the things that's really cool about Amazon is all the great books are free. They're literally free. You can go download them on your Kindle for nothing. The copyright has expired, and people have been putting electronic versions online. So the great books of the Western world, and even many of the great books of the 20th century, are now available completely for free. Well, so you can read them. There's lots of information to be garnered now on YouTube, and that's really going to explode over the next 10 years. And I mean, one of the things I want to work on, probably over the next 10 years, is to set up a humanities university online. And I'm starting to work, I already have some programs online. They're called self-authoring programs, and they help people write. And partly, we designed them to help people learn to write, as well as to help them write about themselves. So the self-authoring programs help people write an autobiography and analyze their personality, faults and virtues, and lay out a future for themselves. And when we've had students do that, do the future authoring program, it's so cool. What happened was that the probability that they would stay in school went up by about 30%. But something even cooler happened. It worked best for the worst performing students. So we did a lot of it in Holland at a business school called Erasmus. There's a school of management, Rotterdam School of Management at Erasmus University. And we ran several, I think it's about 10,000 people through the future authoring program now. And what happened, if you looked at the academic performance of the students, the Dutch women, the native Dutch women, were at the pinnacle. And then it was the Dutch men below them. Now, the women were in a minority, and they were probably a little more highly selected, right? So maybe that accounted for the performance gap. And then underneath that, there was female non-Western ethnic minority immigrants. and then below that were male non-Western ethnic minority immigrants. And there was a massive gap between the Dutch women and the male non-Western minority immigrants, like a performance gap of about 80%. A massive gap. Within 2 years after writing the future authoring program, the male non-ethnic Western minority students passed the Dutch students. Yeah, and some of them didn't even remember that they had done the future authoring exercise. And we replicated that at Mohawk College just a while back. Same thing. The young men who went to Mohawk College, they did this exercise in the summer just before they went to college. They only took about an hour to write out their future. It's not that long to think about your whole future. And what happened was that the young men who had the worst grades in school, who were in non-career oriented trajectories, had a retention improvement of about 40%. So, yeah, so that was just like, we were just thrilled about that. So the reason I'm telling you all of this story, apart from the fact that it's vaguely interesting, is that we are experimenting with technologies to teach people how to write. Now, normally the way you're taught how to write is by having someone edit your writing, but that's prohibitively expensive. I don't think it can be transformed in something that's available on a mass basis. And so what we're trying to do is to break down the process of writing into its requisite steps. That's kind of what behavioral psychologists do. We've done that already a bit with this essay writing format. And then to teach people what the mechanics of writing actually are, and then maybe to try to figure out how to crowdsource editing so that many, many people can participate in the process. But we'd like to set up an online humanities university over the next 10 years. And since the universities have abandoned their intellectual property, there's no reason not to just move in and take it, as far as I can tell. So that's the plan.
Pick you up, Mom's picking up your pills tomorrow anyway, so I don't want you to be up all night and not sleep and shit, so I don't know if we give you both, but don't fuck it up, eh? You get to go over there or whatever. But anyways, if anything happens, come back right away, okay?
So I'll tell you another story about that. So when I lived in Boston, I had little kids, and my wife took care of some neighborhood little kids because she didn't have a green card, and she was home with the kids anyways. And anyway, she took care of some other little kids. One of them would only eat hot dogs. That was quite funny. He'd only eat hot dogs at his mother's place, but at our house he ate all of his lunch, and he was perfectly happy about it. So I thought that was quite amusing too. But anyways, one day a neighbor came by, and the neighbor had a 4-year-old child. And the neighbor was looking for someone to take care of the child because her nanny had been in a car accident and couldn't take care of the child temporarily. So the child had sort of been circulating around neighborhood houses for a couple of days, and people were taking care of him. And then he ended up at our house, and which was fine. And so he's a cute little guy. And the mother came to the door, and she said, she's pushed the boy in, and he was kind of like this. He wasn't very happy, and she said, he probably won't eat all day, but that's okay. And I thought, that's a remarkably interesting statement to put forth as a proposition the first time we meet your son. It's like, he won't eat all day, which, by the way, is not okay. It's not okay. And you're going to tell us that it's okay. And you're going to expect that we're just going to accept the fact that you think it's okay. And that's the whole story. You deliver all that information in one little sentence. So I thought, well, that's pretty damn peculiar. I believe she was a psychologist, too, which was quite interesting. So, okay, so that's fine. So I went out to do something, and there was 4 kids playing in the house, and when I came back, the little guy was in the porch, like where the boots were and everything, and he was sort of standing there like this. And I thought, that's not good, because there's all these other kids. Like, he should have been in there playing, But obviously, that's what a child is primed to do. He should have been in there messing about with, I think there was a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and another 4-year-old. He should have been in there, causing trouble and having fun and playing, but he wasn't. He was standing in the porch like this, and he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy. So I looked at him for a bit, and then I poked him a couple of times because I thought, if you're interacting with little kids, they're very playful, They're kind of like puppies, and so if you tease them a bit and tickle them a bit, then usually, even if they're crabby, a smile will break out despite their best efforts, and then they'll sort of giggle, and maybe, they'll try to whack you away, and they go into a play.
Photographic memory a little bit, or no?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So all these books, are you the kind that you can say page 73,
no, I don't think like that. No, it's not.
Okay,
I know I've known people like that.
Right.
Like I had professors.
Because you seem like you may have a little bit of that. Because the way you...
No, I don't organize myself that way. I knew professors at Harvard, one particular professor, Richard McNally, who was a walking library. Man, he extraordinarily well-read person, very, very smart, very fast on his feet.
Still downstairs, Owen?
That's really how he seemed to organize his knowledge. He would know the author, he would know the page, he'd know the source, he'd know where the book was on his shelf.
To me.
But I'm not like that.
Got it. I thought you were for sure somebody. Okay, so let me...
So I have a theory that I've been working on for a very long time, and what happens when I read something is I plug it into the theory. So I know the full outline of the theory. It would probably take me 45, 50 hours to lay it out in lectures. I've done that online. And then, but it grows and grows and grows and grows, and I know where to put everything. So if I read something, I think, oh yes, that slot's there. And so
you store it as well. If somebody asks you a question, you need to use that fact. You have it somewhere stored where you bring it in and say, okay.
But it has to be related to this work that I've been doing over time.
Got it.
It's kind of like there's this technique called memory castle that people have used for centuries to remember things. And so what you do is you sit and you imagine might be a place that you know, like a geographic place, a house. And then you can place the things that you remember. Imagine you walk through the house. You can place the things that you want to remember at different locations in the house. Mm-hmm. But you have to turn what you're remembering into an image. And then you can walk through the house and you can lift things up and find what it is that you're trying to remember. I sort of do that with this theory. It's like it's been I've literally worked on it it's been 40 years. And so I know the story, and I know its branches, and I keep adding to it and shifting pieces around from time to time. And so that's how I remember things. And I forget a lot of what I read, a tremendous amount of what I read. But now and then something pops up and it sticks. That
changes the complete perspective for me a little bit. For me to know that your views obviously has been vested for many years, but you're also constantly working on it. I guess this leads to me wanting to ask this question from you is, I think, from my opinion, I run a business here. I'm an entrepreneur. We do what we do with Valuetainment. I believe the people that make it to the top of any space, they learn how to process issues better than others. They learn how to put things together, a system that helps them make a good decision. And then from there, they come out with their opinion, maybe based on some facts, based on whatever they collect together, data, to say, this is what I believe about God. This is what I believe about politics. Here's how I view economics. This is what I think works. This is what I think is the way we ought to live, the 12 rules for life, right? Here's what I think boys need to do, or women or men, or this is based on this. What do you do? What is your processing when a topic enters your mind? How are you taking the next necessary step to come up with an answer or a belief that you're very comfortable saying, this is what I believe in? I know one of the questions you don't like to be asked is, do you believe in God? And your response is phenomenal, because you said, one, I don't know what believe means to you, and I don't know what God means to you, because the word believe in God may be a different meaning to me. So that's a very interesting answer to give. But how do you process issues here when a new topic comes out to you? Kavanaugh comes out. Everybody goes through the issue with Kavanaugh, right? And you come out and, afterwards, like, well, I think he needs to,
Well, I usually do think about it.
But I want to know, what's the step? Is it a step process? I'd love to hear that part.
Sure. Well, I can think in images. And so if I'm building things, because I like to do carpentry and fix houses and that sort of thing. And so I like to build things. And if I'm figuring out how to build something, I can picture it. And so I can think in pictures. But I don't usually think in pictures. I usually think in words. And I think pretty formally in words. Like if I'm sitting down, let's say, with the Kavanaugh issue, there was a question. The question Eric Weinstein asked was there an alternative to him being confirmed or not confirmed? Mm-hmm. Because he sort of thought both of those wouldn't bode well for the country. And I thought, okay, well, what could the option possibly be? So I think that through in words, and then think, I eventually thought, he could be nominated, and then how would I feel in a situation like that? Well, my nomination would be very contentious. Is there a way that I could help dampen the contentiousness and still retain my reputation? Thought, you could be nominated and resign. What would be the advantages to that? And then I lay out one side of the argument, and then I lay out the other and another and another, and have an argument. And
with yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, basically what you do, and this is really what you do when you think, is if thinking is an internalized conversation, which at least is one form of thinking, is that you spin off avatars of yourself, and you say, well, you take this position, and you take this position, and you take this position, and then you have each fictional part of yourself, lay out the argument and argue it through. So, for example, when I write, so that's another thing that I've done a lot of to prepare for my lectures. You know, I've written 2 books, and one of them took 15 years. I wrote 3 hours a day for 15 years every day. That was the first book.
That's a
Maps of
technical
Meaning.
book. It's a very
yes, it's a very hard book.
Yes.
That. So I laid out that argument, but the way I did it was, well, first of all, you generate your ideas.
Okay.
That's the first part. There's actually a technical process that goes along with this. I use a computer in a particular way. So imagine I've laid out an essay.
Okay.
Well, then what I'll do is I usually use 2 screens. I take a paragraph out, put it on the other screen, break it into sentences.
Okay.
So I put spaces between all the sentences.
Got it.
Then I look and see if the sentences are organized properly, if that's the proper order. Try to reconstruct them so that they make more sense, they flow better. Then I take each sentence one at a time and try to write a better version of the sentence, maybe 3 or 4 times. And every time I try to write a better version of the sentence, I try to think of all the ways that sentence is wrong and could be fixed. So at the level of the word, at the level of the phrase, at the level of the sentence.
Technical.
Oh, you bet. Like for Maps of Meaning, the first book, I probably wrote every sentence in that book 50 times.
Are you kidding
Oh, no,
me?
absolutely. And then, well, there's more. So then I'll put the paragraph back together, and if it's better than the original paragraph, then I'll put it in. So then I have a replacement for it. But then also imagine it's a chapter. Well, then the chapter has a structure, so I'll outline the structure. So this is real helpful too if you're writing a chapter. It's like, well, boil it down to 10 sentences. So you've written a
chapter down to 10 sentences.
Yeah, you got a chapter, write a 10-sentence outline. And that forces you to condense what you wrote. And with 10 sentences, you can see the argument. Does that argument make sense? Then you can cut and paste the paragraphs from the essay back into that structure. And if you do that 3 or 4 times, then you have a very, very tight argument. I have a writing guide on my website at jordanbpeterson.com under products. It's free. It's just a Word document, but it outlines how to do this. Imagine if you're writing. So here's what you have to get right if you're writing. The whole argument has to make sense as a whole. Okay, you can think rather unclearly and still make an argument that works as a whole. Sometimes I read essays written by intuitive students, and the essay works as a whole. Like there's a good idea in it, but it's very badly written. But there's an idea there. So it sort of succeeds at the highest level. But then if something's written real well, it's every word is the right word. Every phrase is the right phrase. The phrases are put into sentences properly. The sentences are organized into paragraphs properly. And you have to edit at every one of those levels.
That's why I said piano. So it has to be like if one, pianist listen to another person play and one is off, they catch it, right?
Yeah,
a regular person's not going to catch it.
Yeah.
So you're going to that level of perfection.
Well, then I also read everything out loud.
Do you seek perfection in that area?
No, but what I seek, I wouldn't say I seek perfection. What I seek is that I can't do it any better. So I know a book is done when I can't write it any better.
Ability.
Yeah, that's right. I max my ability out. So if I can't, and if I'm at the point where when I'm starting to edit, I'm not sure if it's better, then it's time to quit.
Interesting.
And I also often, if I'm writing, like I'll write something and then wait, like you have to wait a couple of weeks to look at it again, because often when you're writing and you reread it, you read what you think you wrote, because you still have the ideas in your head that are part of the cloud of ideas. And it's not until you forget the context in some sense that you can actually see what you wrote. And so there has to be pauses in your writing.
That is so fucking true. Oh my God. I've never been able to say that out loud, but I don't even know what the fuck. How to say that. That is fucking awesome. I gotta go get that outline.
People are very, very, very guidance around taking notes from books and lectures. Yeah, no problem. Like, don't be taking notes during the lecture, exactly. Because then you're not listening to the lecture. It's like, listen to the lecture and then take notes afterwards. Now, that doesn't work for every discipline, but it certainly works for disciplines. Like, students in my lectures, I always tell them, don't take notes during the lecture. Listen to the damn lecture. You can take notes afterwards, because what that does is force you to practice remembering. And then with regards to books, it's like read don't highlight, don't underline. Like that, I think that's just rubbish. I think it's pseudo work. Read a couple of paragraphs or maybe an essay, something like that, depending on the density of the book. Close the book. Think about it. Write down what you're thinking. Write down what you remember. But in the context of what you're thinking about, because that instantiates it into your memory and puts it at hand. Like people ask me, for example, how it is that I can remember all the things that I talk about extemporaneously when I'm lecturing. And the reason for that is because I've thought them through. You know, I read them and I think, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting idea. How does it relate to all these other ideas that I know? Like, what is its significance for this idea? And what's its significance for this idea? And do I believe it? And how might I criticize it? So it's kind of like I'm attaching little memory hooks to it in 5 different ways. And then I've got it. It's part of me. And that seems to be part of recall rather than recognition. And recall is the spontaneous act of remembering something complex. And when you recall something, you're actually practicing remembering it. And that's what you need to do if you want that to be part of you. So I would say separate out the function of reading and note-taking. So read, think, write. Or read, write, think. Because the last 2 things are quite similar. But don't like read the book and then read a sentence and then write down that sentence. That's not helpful. You could read the sentence, close the book, and then reformulate the sentence so that now it's your sentence, man. Then you'll remember it. Then you'll understand it. That works really well. Going to make the course much richer for you. And I would say, because people often ask me, well, how should I read for this course? Because there's a lot of reading. And the answer is, read as if it matters. That's the right answer. Don't be thinking about how it's going to be tested. If you do the readings and you come to the lectures, then the tests aren't particularly difficult. But you should read the readings as if the person is writing about you. And you should try to understand what the person says because it's another tool for you to use. And I would say, well, with my clients, I use the approaches of one theorist for one client and the approaches of another theorist for another client. It seems to me to depend to some degree actually on the temperament of the client. I found, for example, that people who are very high in openness, which is the creativity dimension, are quite amenable to a Jungian approach, whereas people who are more practical, conscientious, low in openness are much more amenable to a behaviorist approach. We don't really know enough about psychology yet to match treatment to temperament, but those are some of the things that I've experienced. Okay, practicalities. Well, there's a website. I gave you the URL. I'll put it up again at the end of class. The URL lists all the readings that aren't in the textbook. And so the textbook contains the classic readings from people like Jung and Freud and Piaget and so forth, Rogers. And as I said, I picked that particular textbook because I believe that the author did a very credible job of summarizing what's very difficult to summarize. So, and then also on the website there are links to papers because much of the more modern material that pertains, say, to neuroscience and also to trait personality, I think it's better just to read the original papers, and I'll detail them out with you as we go through. And that'll also give you some familiarity with original psychological papers, which are, again, there's an idiom that you have to master in order to understand them. But you might as well practice it, especially if you're interested in continuing with psychology in your educational practice or as a career. It's good to get accustomed to it. So there again is the URL for the class. If you go to jordanbpeterson.com, which isn't too hard to remember, assuming you can remember my name, then classes are listed on the left-hand side. You can just find the syllabus there. All right, so here's what we're going to cover. Well, today, obviously, this is the introduction and overview. Class is a little strange this year because one day it's an hour and the next day it's 2 hours, so not exactly sure how we're going to negotiate our way through that, but we'll figure it out. historical perspectives, mythological representations. Well, I told you that I would try to provide you with a meta-narrative that might enable you to link the theories that we're going to talk about together. So I'm going to describe to you what you might regard as a conceptual language. And as far as I can tell, it's the... Imagine that there are two kinds of things that you need to know. And I believe this to be the case. I believe that you need to know what the world is made of, and I suppose that's the proper domain of science. But then you need to know how to act. And that's a whole different thing. And you need to know how to act. That's the thing you need to know most of anything, because of course you're a living creature, and action in relationship to desired goals is everything to you. And you can think about that from a Darwinian perspective. You have to act at least so that you can survive, at least so that you can find a partner. That's life. The best way to teach people critical thinking is to teach them to write. And I made this little thing that I put online. It's, I don't know, if maybe is it in the Psych 434 website? Did I post that rubric? The best way to teach people critical thinking is to teach them to write. It's very hard to teach people to write because it's unbelievably time intensive. And like marking a good essay, that's really easy. Check A. You did everything right. Marking a...
All right. So first off, every single night you are different. And I think tonight, perhaps more different than any night so far. How the hell do you do it? I honestly don't know. I usually go back in the green room with you for a little bit before, and about 10 minutes before showtime, I walk out of there, and you say you get to think for a little bit. And then you somehow do an hour and a half summing up everything you think in a different way on any given night.
Well, I'll answer that technically. The first thing is that something I tell my students, if you want to write an essay, you need a problem. The essay is an attempt to solve a problem. So first of all, you need a problem. And then second, if you're going to devote time to the problem, then it should be a problem that is your problem. At least a piece of it should be. I have students all the time, they come up to me and they say, tell me what I should write my essay about. And they're often very annoyed that I haven't. You didn't give us a topic. It's like, yes, that's because the topic is the difficult part of the assignment, right? To specify the problem, that's the difficult part of the assignment. In fact, when you're trying to
be 20 years old, and this is the great... Mr. Peterson, first of all, I am a huge fan, and honestly, I'm about to be 20 years old, and this is the greatest day of my life, hearing you speak. I can be honest. And I had a question, because I understand what you're saying, and especially being in an academical setting, we are a huge number of students, and of course we have to navigate towards many things, especially for people who have come from other countries and therefore different cultures. If you could give one advice to us, how we could be able to actually put our opinion out there and to actually make people listen and not to cause some mindless conflict with just yelling. What advice would you give us?
learn to write, I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious about that. Because this like formalized thinking and to write.
What advice would you give us?
Learn to write. I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious about that. Because writing is formalized thinking. And so the way you write is, first of all, you need a problem. Because why write if you don't have a problem? So this is good advice if you're just writing an essay, by the way, for your classes. It's like, pick a bloody problem that you want to write about, because otherwise it's false right from the start. It's up to you to engage with the material until you find something that grips you, that you desire to investigate. Okay, so you need a problem. Well, the next thing you need to do is, well, you need to have something to say about the problem. Well, so reading. Reading is really good for that. Read as much as you can. Get your hands on that addresses the problem. Okay, so now you know a bunch of things, or at least provisionally know them. You at least have access to them. Well, now you start sorting through it. It's like, okay, well, maybe I need to summarize what I've learned, and then I need to iron out the contradictions between what I've learned, and I need to elegantly formulate that, and I need to get my word choice right, and my phrase choice right, and my sentence choice right, and I need to organize the sentences into proper paragraphs, and the paragraphs into proper sequence, so that I have a coherent argument. And at the same time, what you're doing is you're integrating your own personality at the highest and most abstract level of organization, and you're sharpening your tools, and you're putting yourself straight, because you're learning to think. You learn to do that by writing. And so I would say, pick some hard problems and learn to write very, very carefully. And when I say pay attention to the word, I mean that. Pick the right words. Organize them into the right phrases. Get your sentences straight. Like when I wrote my first book, Maps of Meaning, I believe I wrote every sentence in that book 50 times. 50 variants of every sentence. I'd read it once, I'd read it again, I'd read it again, I'd read it again, and I'd have a little competition. Which sentence is better? Which sentence is better? I'd pick that sentence. Do the same with the paragraphs. Over many, many years, you hone your words. They're the most powerful thing about you, bar none. If you are an effective writer and speaker and communicator, you have all the authority and competence that there is. And so you're at university. Maybe you're taking a humanities degree. Well, what's the humanities degree for? It's to teach you how to think. You learn to think by writing. Now, there's more to read, to speak, and all of that. But the best thing you can do is read and write every day. A couple of hours every day. Write about things you find important. And see if you can discover what you believe to be true. And that'll build you a foundation. And it's unbelievably practical. Like if you look at people who are phenomenally successful across life, there's various reasons, but one of them is that they're unbelievably good at articulating what they're aiming at, and strategizing and negotiating and enticing people with a vision forward. It's like, get your words together, man. That makes you unstoppable. And that's the core of the humanities, that idea. Get your words together. Make yourself an articulate creature, and then you're deadly in the best possible way. So, and take that seriously. And I'll end with something too. You students, you might think in your more cynical moments that you have to offer your professors what they want and gerrymander the content of your language to suit their predilections, or what you consider to be their predilections. First of all, it's a very small minority of professors who are corrupt enough to punish you for producing a high-quality essay that they don't agree with. And though that's reprehensible, but it doesn't happen very often. But more importantly, it's the highest academic sin to do that. Because what you're here to do is to learn to find your true voice. And every time you deviate from that for expedient reasons, you corrupt yourself. And not in a trivial way. Because when you formulate your arguments, that becomes a permanent part of your character. You carry that with you. It becomes part of the structure through which you view the world, and it guides your actions. And so you hold your words pristine, and you work in a dedicated way to become as articulate and clear as you can possibly become. And there's nothing that's more practical and noble than that at the same time. That's why the humanities are so valuable. You think, well, what good is a humanities degree? It's like, well, you come out of here able to speak and think and write, no matter where you go, like you're headed for the pinnacle, and hopefully in a way that's positive for everyone. So that's what I would recommend.
So Jordan Peterson, that was a very beautiful way to end the interview and the Q&A, I think. We're almost already a bit over time, almost 10 minutes. But thank you for your passionate words. And yeah, again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Woo!
The way to teach people critical thinking is to teach them to write. And I made this little thing that I put online. I don't know if maybe is it in the Psych 434 website? Did I post that rubric for essay writing?
But I don't think it actually went through. I think it is still on 430. That's how I got
Is it not on 434? Is that not working?
It must not have gone through when you were doing it.
Oh.
Yeah. But I still found it. It's still in 430.
Oh, okay. Well, there's an essay. Oh, that's too bad. It's not on the Psych 434 website even?
I didn't check.
Because I updated it. Anyways, I have this guide to writing that if it isn't on the 434 website, it is definitely on the 430 website. And it steps people through the process of writing. Because what's happened now, it's very hard to teach people to write because it's unbelievably time intensive. And like marking a good essay, that's really easy. Check A. You did everything right. Marking a bad essay? Oh my God. The words are wrong, the phrases are wrong, the sentences are wrong, they're not ordered right in the paragraphs aren't coherent, and the whole thing makes no sense. So, trying to tell the person what they did wrong, it's like, well, you did everything wrong. Everything about this essay is wrong. Well, that's not helpful either. You have to find the few little things they did half right, and you have to teach them what they did wrong. It's really expensive. And so what I did with this rubric was try to address that from the production side instead of the grading side. But the best thing you can do is teach people to write, because there's no difference between that and thinking. And one of the things that just blows me away about universities is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no, you need to learn to think. Because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake. And those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. So that's why you learn to write. It's like, I can't believe that people aren't just told that. It's like, it's the most powerful weapon you can possibly provide someone with. And I know lots of people who've been staggeringly successful and watched them throughout my life. I mean, those people, you don't want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces. And not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're going to make your point and they're going to make their point, you better have your points organized, because otherwise you are going to look like and be an absolute idiot. You are not going to get anywhere. And if you can formulate your arguments coherently and make a presentation, if you can speak to people, if you can lay out a proposal, God, people give you money, they give you opportunities, you have influence. That's what you're at university for. And so that's what you do. You're in English, right? In languages anyways. It's like, yeah, teach people to be articulate, because that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly be. So, and that's motivating if people know that. It's like, well, why are you learning to write? Because here's your sword, here's your M16, right? Here's your bulletproof vest. Like, you learn how to use them. But it's an endless mystery to me why.
One of the books that can be read to be transformative. I mean, the otherness that realizes and that awakens and opens up the self, that turns those lights on, is not just a random otherness. I mean, you can look at a brick wall all day and never get anything like what we get by looking at the King's Chapel that we just came from a few minutes ago. That the levels of pattern and depth and beauty that are present in that building, that's a kind of metaphor for what the most wonderful, most fecund texts of our own past offer to us. You know, there they are lying on the shelf, but when opened up and explored fully, they open up in us. Yeah, they're portals. So I suppose
a book isn't a book. A book isn't paper.
Yes.
That's your memory. That's your perception of the book. It's a portal.
Yes.
And you know, one of the ideas, the postmodern idea, is that, well, there's no canon. And if there is a canon, it's only there to support the tyrannical patriarchy, because, of course, the tyrannical patriarchy is the explanation for everything. But I've been trying to solve that problem technically. I have a small staff that's trying to produce an educational system online. And we've been trying to understand, well, what is it that makes a book canonical? There's actually a technical answer to that. So you imagine that books exist in relationship to one another. That's a perfectly reasonable postmodernist claim, by the way. Books exist in relationship to one another. Okay, well, some books have hardly any relationship to other books. Those are trivial books. Now, they might be undiscovered works of genius. That's another possibility if they're recently written. But it doesn't matter because you can't separate the wheat from the chaff. At present, it's too difficult. There's too much chaff. But if you go back into the past, you can rank order books by the degree to which they've influenced other books. So it's like citations in some sense. And the books that have influenced the largest number of other books are the canonical books. And the ultimate canonical book in the West is clearly the biblical corpus, because it's influenced virtually everything. And so you have to know it because it's implicit in everything else. And so you start there, and so you have that. You have that knowledge, at least to some degree. And it gives you the foundation, the metaphorical foundation, the conceptual foundation, the mythical foundation that you can use to then, well, then maybe you can now Shakespeare opens up to some degree, and now Milton opens up to some degree, and Dante opens up to some degree. And you think, well, why should those open up? And the answer is, well, as the social constructionists claim, you're at least in part a historical creature. Well, then those books are about you. The patterns in those books are the patterns of your perceptions and your actions. And without understanding them, then you don't know who you are, and you can't guide yourself properly through life. And so you come into university and you encounter experts, and they say, look, this is canonical. Why? Because it's had a disproportionate influence on everything else. So there's something here that you need to know about, because it's about you. And it isn't about the you that's here now in some sense. It's about the you that can unfold across time in the best possible way. So each of those works is a call to adventure. Every painting that's a great painting, or a building like the King's Chapel, if that's not a call to adventure, I mean, what else could it be? We were talking about that. So these ancient buildings, these great ancient buildings that Europe is littered with, people were aiming at something beyond themselves, beyond the span of their lifetime. They engaged in the collective manifestation of these great works to aim, to participate in aiming at something that was beyond them. It was a divine aim. They had the will to produce this beauty that transcended centuries. You know, and maybe the will that produces beauty is always aligned with that which transcends centuries. Maybe those are the same things. I mean, even paintings, oil paintings, you know, they take a moment in time and they cast it into a permanent form that can be preserved across centuries. And so there's something about the establishing a relationship with eternity that's key to the construction of something that's beautiful. And then that in itself becomes a call to a relationship with eternity. So, and you need that, people hunger for. Other questions?
So, I mean, I wasn't really aware of what you just sort of said, that most people don't watch movies, because I probably watch them and I just think it's commonplace. So is that why you sort of considered, because we were talking celebrity earlier, that different levels of abstraction of celebrity are respected more. Like reality is probably lower than a
Sure.
Cumberbatch than a theater actor than like a novelist.
Yes, that's exactly why. Because you see, the genre, the more the genre is like real life, and the more sophisticated it is, the more it has abstracted out across instances of real life the fundamental lessons. And that's what makes something profound and deep. It's abstracted from multiple sources and it applies across multiple dimensions. Because that's what you want. It's like, and here's why, fundamentally. It's like, you have a problem, but that's not the problem. The problem is that there are problems. So the problem is a meta-problem. There are problems. You need a solution to that. That's not a solution to a problem. That's a meta-solution to the class of problems. Right. And that's what people have been trying to figure out ever since we were able to actually figure things out. It's not how do you solve a problem. It's how do you act so that you solve the problem of problems. And that's basically, at least, the complexity of life and the fact that you're mortal and vulnerable. So
then a follow-up question. From your book, you have this sort of strata from play all the way up to religion and beyond that, sort of looking back retroactively with philosophy and rationality.
Yes. Well, that's a good one. I would say, if you really want to think this through, the best way to do that is to read Nietzsche and Dostoevsky at the same time. Now, I'm sure there's other ways of doing this, but Nietzsche was actually quite heavily influenced by Dostoevsky, more than people knew, although their thought runs very parallel. And so Dostoevsky is like the ultimate dramatist, right? He embodies his ideas and he has them act out in a dramatic space. It's literary. Whereas Nietzsche has taken that up one level of abstraction to the semantic. He says, well, here's what's going on in an articulated way. But he doesn't embody it in the story. And you might say, well, that's higher, but it's only higher in a way. It's more abstract in that it's more like words. Whereas what Dostoevsky does is half words and half images, right? Because when you read a novel, what happens is that people say, and the postmodernists say, well, where the hell's the meaning in that novel? It's like, it's not in the word, it's not in the phrase, it's not in the sentence, it's not in the paragraph, where do you localize the meaning? It's a great question. Their answer sucks, but the question's great. So, but what happens partly when you're reading a book is that, a novel, is that the words trigger representations in your imagination, and a lot of the information from which a lot of what you extract the information from is actually your imagistic representation of the words. And that imagistic representation is richer than the words because it's informed by all of your knowledge about people. And so you know this happens because you go to a movie like the Harry Potter movies and you say, that's not how I imagined it. Right? The probability that there'll be a one-to-one correspondence between your internal representation of the book and the movie is zero. And usually the movie is less rich than the book. I mean, I love movies and they have their own place, that's for sure. But miniseries, the series now are more approaching the complexity and depth of literature because they can extend across 20 hours. They don't have to compress a 12-hour reading experience into 2 hours of action. So, and so what I was trying to do with that hierarchy was to show how the knowledge moved. Like, first of all, it's kind of implicit in your biology, and then it's distributed into society. And then by imitating society, you make it part of your procedures, and then you watch your own procedures and start to build a representation of them, and then you can articulate that representation. And it's a bootstrapping process, too, because once you've made the representation, that can affect the way you behave, and so they start to loop. And so here's one idea. So imagine that there's a type of male who tends to win dominance hierarchy contests and to emerge at the top. Well, that's the case. That is the case. And that's why you're the way you are. And so what's happened among human beings, this is so cool, is that human females are choosy maters. So about twice as many men fail in their reproductive efforts as females fail. Okay, but the men who succeed are more successful. So women are on average more successful, and men are on average more failures and more successful. And I'm talking strictly about reproduction here, although it generalizes to other areas, but I'm talking about reproduction. So how does it work exactly? Well, the women have a real problem with mate selection. It's like, who the hell are you going to have as a mate? And it's too complex to work out. So women in their genius don't. They let the men compete, and then they peel from the top, acting out the assumption that the man who wins is the best man. And it's a good assumption, because if you have a bunch of men competing, especially if they're competing across competitions, and someone pops up at the top, you can think, well, they may not be worth much, but they're better than anyone else at whatever it is that they're doing. And that makes men at the top of dominance hierarchies very attractive to women. And then the women accelerate that, so you can imagine they're more likely to reproduce. And so what happens is that the proclivity to emerge at the top of the set of dominance hierarchies becomes inbuilt into the biology across time. And the women exaggerate that by differentially allowing the men to reproduce. And that's also why they're Mother Nature. They really are Mother Nature. It's not just a metaphor. And so then the representation and the biology start to tangle together. And that's like, well, that's the difference between a meme and an archetype. Right? A meme is this idea that propagates itself, but an archetype is an idea that has propagated itself across such a massive span of time that it's actually shaped the course of evolution itself. And men, I can tell you already how this... It isn't necessarily that you even have to compete with other men in order to see who wins. As soon as you admire someone, and that'll happen unconsciously, you won't be able to stop yourself. You've already elevated them in the dominance hierarchy contest. The act of admiration is your recognition that you've met someone who's better at whatever it is that happens to be driving your admiration than you are. And so, and that's partly the manifestation of just the idea as the what would you say, as the representation of the ideal. And kids do that all the time. They hero worship other kids. Usually, like a 4-year-old will latch onto some 6-year-old who will just follow, or she'll follow everywhere and do exactly what they do. And it's like, well, why? Well, because that person represents to that child their next ideal, their conceptualization of the place forward. So okay. And any other questions, or should we maybe call it a day?
To forgive, but you cannot forget. So
Why Live, the new eau de toilette intense. Yves Saint Laurent.
Imagine if we played outside instead of online. We could search without an engine and recharge our batteries with sunshine. Instead of looking things up, what if we just look up?
That's the right way to think. See, the God idea, here's another way of thinking about it that's quite cool. I learned this from Jung, and you can take it for what it's worth. The highest ideal that a person holds, consciously or unconsciously, that's their God. It functions in precisely that manner. And people might say, well, I don't believe in God. It's like, well, it depends on what you mean. Right. Like, and I'm not being foolish about that. It's like, we're very complicated creatures, and we're run by all sorts of very strange things down there in the unconscious, you know. And the Greeks thought we were the playthings of the gods because we serve lust, we serve thirst, we serve hunger, we serve rage, you know, and those things all transcend us. So that's why they were gods. You know, rage, that's the war god. Well, why is it a god? Well, it exists forever. It exists in all people. It takes them over and directs their behavior. It's a god. Well, you can quibble about the details. No, it's not a god. Okay, fine. It's a psychological force.
Right. Do people get too hung up on that one word?
Well, they don't really. We have to think about it functionally to some degree. We have to think about what that idea means. We've had that idea forever. It isn't just some superstition. Jesus, we've got to be more sophisticated than that, man.
Right.
And that's partly, this is partly what I think is unfortunate about the new atheists, let's say, is they don't take the damn problem seriously. They think, well, Christianity, that's just a bunch of superstition. It's like, really? No. Sorry. That's just not deep enough, man.
So what it really is the accounts of people trying to work out the issues of being a human.
Let me give you another example. This is so cool. It's Northrop Frye, who was a biblical scholar at the University of Toronto. This was one of his elucidations of the structure of the Bible. So the Bible's actually a story, which is weird because it's a whole bunch of different books written by a whole bunch of different people, edited kind of willy-nilly over thousands of years, and then assembled, by committee. It's a really strange book, but it has a narrative structure. So, and that sort of emerged as a collective decision across these thousands of years. So, the Old Testament, here's the rough story in the Old Testament. Israel is sort of a middle power, and it rises to power, and domination. And then a prophet arises and says, look, you guys are all successful now. You're starting to get corrupt. You're not paying attention to the widows and children. You're not running your state according to the superordinate principle. You might say, well, the superordinate principle doesn't exist. It's like, okay, keep running it that way and see what the hell happens. That's what the prophet says, usually at the risk of his life. He says that to the king. It's like, fine, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the superordinate principle, let's say that, the superordinate ethical principle, no problem. Keep doing what you're doing. Let's see what happens. Well, what happens is Israel gets wiped out, and then for generations it's enslaved or its population is being destroyed, and then it sort of climbs back up to power, and then it gets powerful for a brief period of time, and it gets corrupt, and a prophet comes up and says, remember that superordinate principle that you made a covenant with? You're not paying any attention to it anymore. You better look the hell out. And everyone ignores it, and bang. So it's order, corruption, chaos. Order, corruption, chaos. That happens 6 times now. So there's an idea behind it. The idea, because the state keeps rising, there's an idea that emerges out of that the aim is the perfect state. That's a utopian dream that arises out of that, let's call it, learned process over thousands of years. If we could only get the state perfect, well, let's say like the state of Israel, or the Russian state, the communist state, if we could only bring utopia in at the political level, our problems would be solved. Well, then what happens is there's a transition in conceptualization, and that happens with the New Testament. And the New Testament conceptualization is, wait a minute, the state isn't salvation. The individual is salvation. Now you say, well, we're going to just throw that out, are we? That was a hell of a discovery, man. And then there's more to it. It's not only is the individual salvation, it's the truthful individual that's salvation. You think of how difficult a concept like that is to develop. If there's anything less self-evident than that. Because you think, well, who's going to run the dominance hierarchy? It's like the biggest bloody monster with a club. It's like, no, it turns out those are unstable. Those societies are unstable. They don't work. They collapse into chaos. They get corrupt. They lose sight of the superordinate principle, whatever that is. The stable solution is the individual that tells the truth. And it's taken us forever to figure that out. And that's partly what the postmodernists are after. That's their anti-phallogocentrism. That's why they skitter off and hide in their ideology. They're afraid to come out. They're afraid to be seen. They're afraid to speak because they have nothing to say. So we have to get sophisticated about this stuff, or we're going to throw it away without understanding it. It's unbelievable. Like that story is, it's the story upon Western civilization. It's the story upon which Western civilization is founded. That's why Nietzsche said when God was dead that everything would collapse into chaos. He didn't say that triumphantly. He knew what was going to happen. So did Dostoevsky. That's why I admire those people so much. They knew what was coming. So what I've been trying to do, and I've been guided in large part by Jung, because he was the first. See, Jung took Nietzsche's problem seriously. Nietzsche said, look, we're losing our faith. We're losing our ability to relate to this superordinate ethical principle. And he actually blamed Christianity for killing itself with the sort of truth that it had produced. Said, so we're going to lose this, and it's big trouble. Make no mistake about it, because our whole society is founded on those principles. We get rid of the animating spirit at the base of it, we're going to lose all of it. So, and Nietzsche thought, well, we're going to have to become superhuman to manage it. That's where his concept of the overman comes from, or the superman, which the Nazis sort of pulled off and parodied, I would say. Now, Jung, you see, Jung was a student of Nietzsche's, not directly, but very much influenced by him. Jung thought that Nietzsche was wrong, that we couldn't create our own values. Because, look, it's so hard to create your own value. Like, let's say you're kind of an overweight guy and you decide to go to the gym for your New Year's resolution. It's like you don't. You go twice and then you stop, and it's because you can't create your own values, right? It's hard. You're not your own slave. You can't just tell yourself what to do. You have a nature. And so Jung's idea was, well, that we had to go back to the mythology. We had to go back to the stories. We had to go back into the underground, unconscious chaos and lift out what we had forgotten. And that's what he was trying to do with his psychology, and he's done it very effectively. Very, very effectively. He was a revolutionary thinker, but very difficult to understand. And so I've been working with Jung's ideas for a long time, trying to, I would say, make them more rational and articulate. And believe me, that's no critique, because every time I go back to Jung, which I do from time to time, thinking I've kind of mastered him, I learn a bunch of stuff that I didn't know. So what I've been trying to do is to resurrect, I'm trying to resurrect the dormant logos, I suppose, if you have to put it that way. That's what I'm trying to do.
So everybody, when I never met in person, I never met Jordan Peterson in person. But I said to him when we met right before lunch, something that is said to me by so many people who meet me for the first time, I feel like I know you. And that is the highest compliment in effect. I now understand what a compliment it is when I receive it, because I never gave it to somebody before you. And I have watched you for hours and listened to you and read your book. And in fact, I didn't just read your book, I heard your book from you. So I want to tell you something without embarrassing you. But I think I like to, you open your heart and your mind, and so do I. When I was very young, I realized that God or nature had given me what I have called a goodness detector. And I always knew when I was in the presence of a good person, because that's all I really care about. I think brains are wildly overrated. Wildly. That's why I think you're not bright if you join Mensa. Why you would want to announce to the world your IQ is so bizarre to me that I'm sure there are nice people there, but I don't understand it. But I always picked up that, and I've always been right. I'm batting 1,000 essentially. And when I heard you read your book, the passion comes from, I just want to help people lead a better life. And it's really, it's quite overwhelming. You didn't just read that book. I won't say you sang it, but I like that you use music. I'm very much into music too. So this is the man that honored to have this dialogue with, because everybody knows you're bright, but I know you're good. So I wanted to state that at the outset.
See, I have something to say about that.
Good. That's good.
See, I don't think it's true. I mean, this is why I got motivated to do what I've been doing, and I've been doing what I've been doing for, I would say, since about 1979, in one form or another, because things take a long time to generate. And one of the things I learned in the early 80s was that people have a great capacity for evil, and I didn't really understand that of myself until the early 80s, something like that, after meditating on it for a long time. And so I would say, it's not that I would never claim to be good. I think it's dangerous. But I did become terrified of how terrible I could be. And I mean, I became terrified about how terrible human beings could be, and that's one thing, but that's easy. It's easy to confuse that with other human beings. You know, it's a different thing to understand that it's true of yourself. I often recommend to my students that they read history as a perpetrator and not as a victim or a hero. And people very seldom do that, and it's no wonder. But I would say, perhaps, that I became terrified enough from learning what I learned that I tried to avoid the pathways that lead people to the dark places that they go. And there's something in that that might approximate good.
Yeah, it does approximate good. I would agree with that. The parallels between us are so eerie to me that in my book on happiness, which came out in '99, I actually have a chapter on the necessity of having a tragic view of life. And then I hear you speak of, like just now, this tragic view of life. And ironically, if you don't have that, you can't be happy. So it's just another example of this, and that you're getting this message out. If you want to comment on that, please. If not, I'll go on. You are such an, I watch you and you're such an intense listener. I don't know when you're going to react. So, if you...
Well, there's this old idea. You all know this idea. It's an idea that's expressed, for example, in the classic Disney movie, which I really like, called Pinocchio. And you know, when Pinocchio is attempting to free himself from the forces that manipulate him as a puppet and to become an autonomous being, he is required to go to the darkest place to find the worst monster and face that voluntarily. And in doing so, he rescues his father. And that's a very old idea. I don't know how old it is. It's one of the oldest ideas we have in written form, and there's no doubt that in its pre-written form it would be tens of thousands of years older than that. And it's a very strange idea that you have to journey to the darkest abyss to free the spirit of your father. But there's a reason for it, and it has to do with the tragic view of life, which is that you can't discover what you're capable of being or withstanding, and those are the same things, without, if you hide away from any of the things about life that are terrible but true. And the reason you can't discover who you are without doing that is that only necessity will force that out of you. I mean that from the perspective of learning. If you go work in a palliative care ward, you'll learn to deal with death. You'll learn the psychological strategies necessary the steps. You'll become more informed. But it's deeper than that even. We know now from a biological perspective that if you put yourself in new situations, in new and challenging situations, that new genes turn on in your nervous system and code for new proteins that produce new neurological structures. And so you can't even be what you are fully biologically unless you expose yourself to everything that you can expose yourself to as you journey through life. The old idea of a pilgrimage was predicated on that idea, as is walking the in Chartres Cathedral, the labyrinth. The idea that you walk the labyrinth in Chartres and you come to the center is that you traverse every corner of the world, quarter by quarter, and then you come to the center. And the center is the center of the church, and it's the center of the crucifixion, it's the center of suffering. And you can't get to what that center signifies without having journeyed everywhere. And so the tragic view of life is necessary because it puts you on the journey that reveals to yourself who you could be if you were courageous as you could be and as truthful as you could be. And that's equivalent to discovering, to revivifying your dead father, because you are an ancient creature in some sense, and perhaps one with a spark of divinity inherent in it. But you will never release that unless you're willing to go everywhere that you have to go, because only necessity will call that out of you. And so you can't be happy. You can't be complete you can't know what you could withstand. You can't have any proper sense of self-respect unless you know what you can tolerate. And if you avoid everything that you have reason to avoid, but should nonetheless not avoid, you won't know who you are, and then you can't live properly. So
you have said on a number of occasions, and on every occasion that I have watched you say it, not a single person in the panel, you often talk on panels, not one person has ever actually reacted to it. I totally get it. Nevertheless, it's one of the most important things you regularly say. You live as if there is a God. Is that correct?
Well, people ask me if I believe in God. You know, I'm going to release a podcast about that, because I answered that question for about 2 hours in Australia, because people kept asking me that question, which I really don't like. I don't like that question. And so I sat and thought about it for a good while, and I tried to figure out why. And then I thought, well, you believe. You see, I thought, who would have the audacity to claim that they believed in God if they examined the way they lived? Who would dare say that? To believe, you think, to believe in a Christian sense, to actually, this is why Nietzsche said there was only ever one Christian, and that was Christ. To have the audacity to claim that means that you live it out fully. And that's an unbearable task in some sense. I just debated Slavoj Žižek about a week ago, although it wasn't really much of a debate. It was a strange event. But he said something very brilliant, and to me that justified the entire event, at least from my perspective. He talked about Christ's moment of crisis on the cross when he cried out to God that he had been forsaken. And what Žižek said was that what that meant was that the conditions of human existence are so tragic that even God himself in human form lost faith for a moment in the goodness of being. And I thought that was a remarkable observation because, well, if God himself would lose faith under such conditions, what would you expect from normal human beings confronted with what we're confronted by? And to be able to accept the structure of existence, the suffering that goes along with it, and the disappointment and the betrayal, and to nonetheless act properly, right? To aim at the good with all your heart, right? To dispense with the malevolence and your desire for destruction and revenge and all of that, and to face things courageously and to tell the truth, to speak the truth and to act it out. That's what it means to believe. That's what it means. It doesn't mean to state it. It means to act it out. And unless you act it out, you should be very careful about claiming it. And so I've never been comfortable saying anything other than I try to act as if God exists, because God only knows what you'd be if you truly believed. I mean, if you think about it in some sense, that's the central idea in Christianity, is that if you were capable of believing, it would be a transfiguring event, a truly transfiguring event. And I know people experience that to one degree or another, but we have no idea what the limit of that is. And we have no idea what the possibility is within each person if they lived a life that was maximally courageous and maximally truthful. You know, because maybe you're running at 60% or 70% or 20% and at cross purposes to yourself. God only knows what you'd be if you believed. And so, while I try to act like I believe, but I'd never claim that I manage it, because it's a lot to manage properly, and you have to be careful about claiming to manage things that you can't manage. And so that's part of the answer to that question.
It's a great answer, as it happens. I'd like you to react to something that is very operative in my life. I always tell people on my radio show, and totally feel free to say, sorry, I really don't find that tenable, or however you want to react. My route as an adult to God has been completely circuitous. I have come through the back door. As I wrote 25 years ago, How I Found God at Columbia, I realized in the 70s at graduate school at Columbia that I was being taught nonsense, literally nonsense, things that made no sense. And it drove me crazy because they were all bright. Bright people taught me nonsense. One day, walking through Columbia, the only time I ever had, I wouldn't say I never had a theophany, but I did have an epiphany. All of a sudden, one of the verses from my yeshiva education in Brooklyn, New York, the cloistered Orthodox world of my childhood, and I don't use cloistered, and I don't like cloistered, but I'm not using it in a pejorative way. I'm just explaining what I had. And all of a sudden, one of the verses that we said every morning in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, for the first time since second grade, came to my brain. Rishit Chachma Yirat Adonai. Wisdom begins with fear of the Lord. Changed my life. There's no wisdom at Columbia because there's no God at Columbia. And that is one of the ways I knew, without God, look what happens. Without God, look what happens morally, intellectually, in terms of wisdom. And my biggest reasons for belief in God are watching what happens when people don't. So I'd love to have your reaction.
Is it C.S. Lewis? Was it C.S. Lewis who said that if you cease to believe in God, you'll start to believe in anything?
That was the British guy.
Chesterton.
Yeah, Chesterton.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, if Catholicism, I've gone through lots of Catholic cathedrals in Europe, and of course they're stunning creations, but they're Gothic and strange, and the doctrine is eerie and complex and surreal, and the biblical writings are the same. You think of a book like Revelation, for example. But I think that the Catholicism, that's as sane as people can get. Broadly speaking, is that we need a metaphysic, a narrative metaphysic to hold us together. And it has to be predicated on something that's transcendent and absolute. And if you lose that, then you'll fall for something else.